Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You are reminded to mute your mics.
Mic, yeah.
Mimi, please, can we start? It's 2 p.m.
All right. A very good day to you all. I hope we're doing okay. You are all welcome to the second edition of the AMR Forum. If you weren't here last year, then you are in for a surprise. If you were here last year, maybe you have a tidbit of what you expected to do today. But once again, we want to say welcome to everyone. We appreciate all of you for being here. My name is Manuela Kofi, popularly known as Mimi. You can call me Mimi. I'm one of your moderators for the day, and I'm here with the very beautiful Miss Diane. She's going to introduce herself as well, and we'll keep this program going. So, Diane, the floor is yours. Diane, your mic is muted. Your mic is muted.
Oh, so sorry about that. So I was saying that I'm Dan Mankata, and like Mimi said, I'll be moderating with her, and you can just call me Diane for today. Mimi, back to you.
But I just want to put that now.
This.
Manuela, please, can you start? Dr. Dubiel is here.
What?
Guys, I want to humbly ask that you mute your mics, please. If you're not speaking, kindly mute your mics.
Manuela, I believe you are muted.
Once again, you're all welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to run through this program with a series of icebreakers. We have phenomenal speakers lined up for you. So I want to encourage that it's not going to be a boring session. So if you already have food by your side and you're going to eat and prepare to sleep, please think twice because we have something power-packed for you. After every speaker session, we may do something little. So please be on guard, stay tuned. And for all you know, you could win a goodie or two today. So like I mentioned, the program is going to be as exciting. We have our very first entry for the day. It goes by the name Dr. Abedihil Gabriel. He's an Ethiopian national, has long been an advocate for the critical role of agriculture and how it is played in sustainable development. With extensive experience in the sub-Saharan development landscape, expertise, and approach to the Food and Agriculture Organization as it addresses development challenges in the region. He joined the FAO in 2015 and as Deputy Regional Representative for Africa and Representative Ghana since 2017. He's also served as National Program for Africa. He holds a fellowship at the International Institute of Social Studies in The Hague, Netherlands. He obtained his bachelor's degree in agricultural economics from Alimaya University of Agriculture, now the Haramaya University, Ethiopia. Ladies and gentlemen, you know him, you love him. Let's welcome Dr. Hale Gabriel to the platform. You can send in your comments, you can send in your applause. Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. We appreciate you so much for taking time off your busy schedule to be here with us. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much for that very rich introduction. I'm humbled. Can you hear me? Let me confirm before continuing.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Distinguished participants of this forum, dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to address you all during this African Youth AMR Forum 2.0, as it's called, as part of the World Antimicrobial Resistance Awareness Week. I must say that the choice of the theme is quite apt, namely meaningful youth engagement to educate, advocate, and act on AMR. We all find ourselves on the same front lines against a global threat of AMR. Today, this silent pandemic stands as one of the biggest challenges to global health, affecting humans, animals, and ecosystem alike. Treating infections has become more difficult, with repercussions that include prolonged illness, increased healthcare costs, and heightened mortality rates. By 2050, AMR could result in an estimated 10 million deaths annually if left unchecked. This is more than the lives lost to cancer today. If not tackled effectively, Africa could face over 4.1 million AMR-related deaths annually by 2050. So Africa faces distinct challenges in addressing AMR effectively, and this include, I'll just focus on 4. The first is inadequate surveillance systems. Limited AMR surveillance data makes it challenging to track resistance patterns and implement targeted interventions. Secondly, related to the overuse and misuse of antibiotics. The widespread, unregulated access to antibiotics encourages misuse, whether through self-medication or overuse in agriculture. The third is related to lack of awareness and education. The low levels of AMR awareness among healthcare professionals, farmers, and the broader public exacerbate its spread. The problem is further exacerbated by factors such as inadequate healthcare infrastructure, limited access to quality healthcare, and unregulated antimicrobial usage. FAO, in collaboration with 29 countries in Africa and partners, including WHO, the World Organization for Animal Health, the African Union, among others, is supporting the efforts to fight against AMR. Our efforts underpinned by global partnerships, including the USAID's Global Health Security Programs, the Fleming Fund, the UK, the Pandemic Fund, among others, focus on building capacities in 3 critical areas, namely detection of AMR threats, implementation of best practices to reduce antimicrobial use and improve food safety, and raising awareness among stakeholders on responsible use of antimicrobials. This initiative supports countries to develop and execute national AMR action plans, strengthen laboratories and AMR surveillance capabilities, and promote behavioral change through farmer field schools and extension services. This year, FAO co-leads the 5th Joint World Antimicrobial Resistance Awareness Week alongside our partners and the government of Cameroon, underscoring our commitment to tackling AMR across Africa. One of the 6 objectives of World Antimicrobial Awareness Week 2024 is to enhance knowledge transfer around AMR, focusing on the use, action, and public education sphere. The awareness activities include student debates, field activities, football tournaments, and farm visits, all designed to engage youth and communities and make AMR awareness part of everyday understanding. The youth play a critical role not only in this week's activities, but in our long-term response to AMR, whether they are educating others, advocating for policy, or leading community actions. The youth role is indispensable. So I have special messages to the youth. 3 messages. 1, knowledge sharing is foundational. As youth educators, you can inform your peers, families, and communities about AMR and the importance of responsible antimicrobial use in both health and agriculture. The second is your voice is powerful. Advocacy at local and national levels can influence policies and creates the momentum needed to tackle AMR head-on. Through partnerships, regional alliances, and social media, you can drive AMR awareness to the top of the agenda. Third, last but not least, is about knowledge and advocacy. It must lead to action. I believe many of you are already creating solutions, leading AMR initiatives, and promoting sustainable practices. Whether it is through responsible agri-food systems investment, AMR surveillance projects, or farm-level awareness campaigns, your actions are directly contributing to a stronger response against AMR. It is in recognition of such a critical role of the youth that FAO has identified youth action as one of the 3 pillars of the World Food Forum, celebrated every October in Rome. The other 2 pillars being science and innovation and investment. In closing, please allow me to express my gratitude to the forum organizers and to each of you for your commitment to addressing AMR. You are not just participants, you are leaders shaping Africa's future. I look forward to seeing the impact you will make as you educate, advocate, and act against AMR. Together, let's create an Africa resilient to AMR, where health, innovation, and unity prevail. Thank you, and I wish you a successful forum.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haley Gabriel. It's good to know how the FAO is educating and encouraging youth and youth engagement. Yes, we definitely need to use our voices to drive awareness. And I believe we should all work better to show action through the solutions that we create. Thank you so much once again. Up next, we'll be having a brief address from Ms. Fauzia Mohammed. So Ms. Fauzia Mohammed is an expert in antimicrobial resistance with a background in molecular biology and public health as well. And she currently works with the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where she leads efforts to combat AMR across Africa. So drawing on her expertise in both molecular biology and public health, she's very instrumental in developing AMR policies, strategies, and advocacy initiatives. And she works to strengthen health systems, drive evidence-based interventions, and promote sustainable AMR practices. I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to tell us. So Ms. Fauzia Mohammed, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm really honored to be here today. I just wanted to confirm with you if you can hear me. And also like to apologize because we are having the AU-UN quadripartite WOW inaugural meeting. I mean, sorry, the continental meeting in Cameroon, and currently we are facilitating some dialogue. So I'm really sorry I might not turn on my video as I'm in another meeting, but I would like to say thank you so much once again, and I really do appreciate your invitation. And I would like to pass the message from our Director General, Dr. John Kasser, our Head of Division, Dr. Merawi, who's aware of this particular activity. The One Health Unit Lead, Dr. Iwande, has always been very instrumental in involving young people in our discussions all the time. So I would like just to highlight the critical, the importance of engaging young people. As a young person myself, and who has been closely working with youth, and also especially the recently formulated the task force on the youth task force on AMR that has recently been launched. I think it was March this year, and what it has done so far and how instrumental it has been, especially in taking the African young voices forward. So as you may know, this year has been very essential, very big, very important for the AMR course, because we had the United Nations General Assembly, which was concluded in September. Last week, we had the ministerial meeting that happened in Saudi Arabia. And why am I bringing this high-level meeting? It's because sometimes we realize that in as much as we want to highlight the progress that we have made in the AMR space, the voices of young people are still not really included in these high-level discussions. I know there are some young people who manage to be part of these meetings, but still I feel there was like a gap in how we were involving young people in these high-level discussions. So AMR is generally a challenge in the whole world. It's not just something that is specific to the African continent, and it is essential to recognize the role young people will be playing in shaping the future, especially in a continent like Africa, where over 60% of the population are below 25 years old. So these are the leaders that we are talking about. These are the people who are going to shape the policies in the continent. These are the people who are supposed to be the catalyst of change. So if we don't create the space for them right now, if we don't build capacity, if we don't avail the necessary resources to help them build and to help them become the leaders that we wish to have in the future, I think we are not really doing justice, for the African continent and for the young population in the African continent. So engaging youth in AMR is very important, especially in decisions. Especially the decisions that we make. These are digital natives. These are people who have access to, because we're in an information age, and these are people who have access to vast network like social media, and we can make them powerful ambassadors for spreading the information, both at a community level, in the digital space, at a national level, by the way, because we don't have to really limit young people's ability just to social media as well. We can really influence policies at a national level and even at a regional, continental, global level. So Africa CDC has been very instrumental in the past few years, constituting young people and making them supporting them in the different work that they do, including the AU Bingwa. And you will realize that some of the reason why they came up with the AU Bingwa was mainly to during the COVID-19 vaccination, if you may remember that. But as we move forward, we are trying to make it like bigger and incorporate all the other aspects so that we have a youth department that is dedicated to young people in the public health space, whether it is building capacities, availing resources, or like conducting this training, especially, or even mobilizing more resources for them, like whether they are the organizations that they're leading, or whether it is whatever that they are doing, making sure that the voices of young people are heard and they are present at decision-making tables. So if you may go to the continental level, AMR is sometimes we realize this AMR is one of the discussions that we don't give too much attention to. And this is because you can't really say this person has an AMR. It's not something that you can really tell the symptoms are not visible. So taking these messages to the community or translating these messages in a way that people do understand sometimes can be very difficult, right? So platforms to engage AMR advocacy where these issues are being addressed is very critical when we involve young people. So for me, as a young person myself in this space who has been part of different youth and discussions, especially in the AMR space, I would like to say that we need involvement, we need youth engagement in all aspects. We need to build the capacities for young people. And as Africa CDC, we need just to continue, not just saying that, oh, we have a youth department that is dedicated for ABCD, but also making sure that this goes to the lowest level, to the community level. We just don't leave things at just the tables, for example. We have to implement, because that is where we are normally having issues. So as we move forward, let's try to harness the energy and passion of the young people. Let's invest in their leadership. Let's support their efforts to safeguard our future, and also from the threat that AMR is currently posing to us. I would like to say thank you so much once again for inviting us. We are more than happy to engage you even beyond this as we move forward, not just in the awareness week but even after. And I would like to say thank you once again. And I'm sorry I might drop off after this, but please, I will leave my email behind and my contact if need be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Fauzi. I really appreciate that entry. We look forward to having more of these platforms so we can establish these connections with you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a short address from the AMR Youth Liaison Officer from Dasset Blue Foundation in the person of Mr. Hafiz Hamza. Mr. Hafiz Hamza, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I hope I'm audible. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir.
Great. I'm so sorry that I'm right now, actually, what Fozia mentioned, just wrapping up the meeting from the high-level meeting. Right now, you might be hearing some background noise, but on my way to catch my flight. But just want to really welcome all of you participants to this great African AMR Youth Forum 2.0. Love the theme, meaningful youth engagement, to educate, advocate, and act now, which is really critical. My message to all of you would be, you're here today. You are the change makers. You are the generation that will make this happen. You guys are the driving force. And so really, these sessions are really jam-packed. We have excellent speakers as well lined up for you. Make sure that you learn, make sure you engage, ask questions, develop your skills, develop your capacity, because AMR knows no borders, knows no age brackets, but you guys are the driving force that will make this happen. So I want to challenge you as well. Today you're sitting here as a participant during WOW 2024. What do you want to be doing during WOW 2025? You know, whether you want to be hosting another or supporting, organizing, whether you want to be speaking, whether you want to be participating in competition, really the challenge is up to you. So utilize this opportunity to make sure that you're able to gain knowledge, empower yourself, build your capacity, and also make sure that you make a difference. So that's it from my side. I really have to rush. But I wish you all a very fantastic forum. And yeah, I'll drop my email too in case you need to reach out to me. Thank you.
So the whole thing will be short, but you let me record.
Thank you, Mr. Hamza, for making the time to be here with us. We move into our speaker sessions, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Diane, the floor is all yours. Take over for the first speaking sessions. So if you don't have a notepad and a pen, if you're not going to be recording, please be advised that you do get one, because there are some important details that you may need to take with you today. All right, we're moving on to our first speaker for the day. And we guarantee this is going to be an extra exciting session. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Noel Gahamani is a Rwandanese and a clinical microbiologist. So to all my microbiology lovers, please, this is your time to take something extra from today's speech. He holds both a PhD and MSc in microbiology. Currently, he's serving as the acting division manager of the National Reference Laboratory at the Rwanda Biomedical Center. Before that, he was the director of the microbiology unit in the same division. Dr. Gahamani also serves as a visiting lecturer of microbiology at the University of Rwanda. His research has been mainly on the antimicrobial resistance profiles of bacterial pathogens and finding alternative treatment options. Currently, he's doing a postdoctoral fellowship on the resistance of Plasmodium falciparum to Artemether lumefantrine. If you've ever had malaria, this should be very common to you. He has published over 24 articles related to microbiology in peer-reviewed journals and co-authored a book chapter. If you're interested in them, I'm sure he can leave a couple of links here today so you can have some to read after. Dr. Gahamani is a member of the American Society for Microbiology and the Young East African Health Research Scientists Forum, affiliated to the East African Health Research Commission. He has also been a part of the team that organized the World Antimicrobial Resistance Awareness Week since 2021 and has actively contributed to the development of different policy documents related to AMR. Today, he will shed a lot of light on his knowledge and hopefully leave some links for us to read after here. After this session, you definitely should have your AMR view expanded. Dr. Gahamani, thank you so much for being here with us. The floor is yours.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. There is already, I'm being asked to unmute myself, but I have already unmuted. So I'm going to take you through this presentation on antimicrobials and antimicrobial resistance, the past, the present, and also the future. So we cannot talk about antimicrobial resistance if we don't talk about, first of all, what are antimicrobials? So antimicrobials, those are the drugs we use to treat the infections caused by different microorganisms. Mainly, when you say about antibiotics, we are targeting bacteria. When you say antivirals, those are targeting viruses like HIV, like hepatitis, and others. Antiparasitic, let's say malaria, is one of the parasites. So the drug we use, they are antiparasitic. Then also antifungals, which target different fungal infections, like some of the yeast, let's say Candida. Then how does antimicrobial resistance normally develops? So when we are using antimicrobials, there are microorganisms, let's say in the body, and when you use the drugs, they will kill the pathogen that are sensitive to that drug. However, some will be selected, which are resistant. So those will remain, will not die. And they are able to multiply several times and to get millions of copies of that microorganisms. So those ones that are resistant, they cannot multiply and they will be able to spread. So antimicrobial resistance normally has been defined by the quadripartite, as we have seen the a baby from the FAO. So antimicrobial resistance happens when when the microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, they are no longer responding to the drugs that are normally meant to kill them. But that one has consequences that makes the infections difficult to treat, and even sometimes even death. We see some of the numbers of the past infections. So antimicrobial resistance is actually the ability of the microbes to nullify the effect of drugs, thus making them ineffective and leading to hard to treat infections. So when we talk about the past of antimicrobial resistance, actually antimicrobial resistance is a natural phenomenon. It happens naturally because as microorganisms are dividing, they have mutations, so they can get the resistance to the antimicrobials. But resistance is somehow made fast when we misuse the antimicrobials. So all antimicrobials normally have the potential to select the AMR subpopulation, some of them which will remain after using the drug. But the more we use the drugs, mainly the antimicrobials, the more we are putting pressure on microorganisms to develop the resistance. So normally they say like antimicrobial resistance, they used to say like between 1 to 5 years after the antimicrobial is put on the market. Normally it may take up to 5 years, 1 to 5 years to develop the resistance. So if you can see on this figure, let's say the penicillin was discovered in 1928, but it was massively produced around 1940s. So in 1940s, the first resistance already occurred. The same also, if you can see for tetracycline. So in 1953, the first resistance occurred. So it's like also the carbapenems, the imipenem, meropenems. So they developed like in 1985, but in 1993, resistance occurred. I put also another image, like in the UK, where the most antibiotics that were used in 2014 were penicillins, tetracyclines, and macrolides. So it means that the more you use those antimicrobials, the more you are, it's like you are promoting the development of the resistance. So resistance, as I said, is a natural phenomenon. I think you are able to see that slide are changing. If as no one is claiming, I think it's okay so far. You see the slide changing?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is Alexander Fleming. It's like he warned us when he was getting his Nobel Prize, a note of warning. So some of you are microbiologists, some others are maybe pharmacists. So in the lab, we test microorganisms and the sensitivity. So sometimes we use less antibiotics in concentration. So he warned us, it's not difficult to make microbes resistant to penicillin in the laboratory by exposing them to concentrations not sufficient to kill them. And the same thing has occasionally happened in the body. The same also in the body. Another statement of Alexander Fleming, an ignorant man may underdose himself, make them resistant, rendering penicillin ineffective in the future. So if you're taking less, that's why when you are prescribed an antibiotic, there is the dosage, how much, how many pills will you take and for how long. So it means that when you don't take the dosage as prescribed, you are exposing your microbes to less dosage, which will make them resistant. So he has already warned when he was receiving his Nobel Prize. So this also, it's like a timeline of the resistance, how it occurred. Normally it used to be like 5 years, but now it has reduced to almost like 1 year. So as an antibiotic is put on market, it means that after 1 year, the first resistance can be seen. Some of the pathogens that have developed resistance, this, let's say penicillin resistance, it was in 1940, I mentioned Staphylococcus aureus. For sulfonamide, like during the World War II, Second War, streptomycin resistance in Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So those antibiotics, when they were used, they promoted the resistance. So when we say about, let's say, the present, now, in the last, let's say, 5 years, people have started to become aware of the issue, antimicrobial resistance. now increasing the awareness. That's why even we have this World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. It used to be World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, but the quadripartite changed to make it the name to the World Antimicrobial Resistance Awareness Week. So when you say on antimicrobial, it's not enough. The focus is on antimicrobial resistance. So this paper of Murray, you can search it from Google Scholar. It was published in 2022, but the estimates were based on the 2019 year, where around 5 million, so 4.95 million people died, and those deaths were associated with AMR. Of them, 1.27 million were directly attributable to the bacterial AMR. So you see how many deaths have occurred in 2019. It's not something that we should take lightly. It's very serious. The same paper has shown that the death due to AMR directly were higher than the death associated with HIV, which was around 800 something. The death due to breast cancer, 700,000. Also death due to malaria, 600 something. So death due to AMR were higher than those ones, highlighting the issue that how it is. That was only 2019. A recent paper that was published even in this year now looked at the 2 decades, I may say. So it's like between 1990 to 2021. So the number are not very much different. The estimates say that around 4.71 million deaths were associated with MR and 1.14 million deaths attributable to MR directly. So we are talking about now the presence of the MR. Did you know that around 70% of the antimicrobials are used in animals and only 30% in humans? So it means that we should target also the One Health approach. If we only concentrate on humans, we won't solve the problem. No, we should also think of animals, because most antibiotics are used in the livestock. And maybe you don't know, or some of you know, if antimicrobials are used in animals, the microorganisms that may be in normal flora in animals, they become resistant to the antibiotics. And once we consume either milk or meat, we may consume those microorganisms that are already resistant. So about the future of AMR, the projections say that by the year 2050, 10 million people will be dying every year due to AMR. So you see how the issue is. And the cost, the estimate says that around 100 trillion will be spent due to AMR, due to like the increased hospitalization, needing more expensive treatments. So the cost due to AMR will be very high. So in 2019, it was 1.2 million deaths. And the estimate said that by 2030, 24 million people will be sent into extreme poverty due to AMR, because AMR is associated with not only death, but also it has an impact on the economy, because livestock may die. So it has a lot of consequences. So 2050, I already mentioned it. So another projection said that in the Western Pacific region, 5.2 million people will be dying due to AMR by 2030. So because we are seeing the future of this antimicrobial resistance, we should also link this with the antibiotics. Actually, most of the antibiotics have been discovered or made in the 1980s. So very few antibiotics are now on the market or being developed. Why? Because if an antibiotic is put on the market and the next year the resistance is high, so pharmaceutical companies are reluctant, are not investing much into the discovery of the new antibiotic. And this may take even 15 years to be put on the market. So you may have like 80 antibiotics in the pipeline or 90, but how many will reach the market? Let's say maybe 5 or 10. So they are not really investing more into this, the discovery of new antibiotics. So you can even check the list of the website of the WHO. some of the antimicrobials that are in the pipeline and what pathogens are being targeted. So for the future of the AMR, actually, we should all be worried because some say it is the next pandemic. Antimicrobial resistance will be the next pandemic. Others say it is even looming. It's a looming pandemic. It is there. But the issue is that we are not testing enough. If we don't test enough, we will not know what is happening currently. So there's another study that was done on a map in the 14 countries in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, which showed that only 1.1% of the laboratories in sub-Saharan Africa have the bacteriology capacity lab. It means that we don't test, and if we don't test, we tend to misuse the antimicrobials in the prescription mainly. So it's a looming pandemic. It is there, but we are not aware of it. I may say that. So before I conclude, we have published the paper recently. Maybe you can Google it on the weapons against antimicrobial resistance. It's better that I touch on it because one of them is what we are doing, educate and awareness. So we should make people aware in the community, healthcare professionals, in veterinarians, everyone should know the issue of antimicrobial resistance. So educate and improve the awareness. Antimicrobial stewardships. So the clinicians, the prescribers, they should now know the issue of antimicrobial resistance, where antibiotics like imipenem or meropenems, they should be reserved. There's what we call aware classification by the WHO. Access, watch, and reserve. So some of the antibiotics should be put into the reserve so they are not misused. Think of the alternative treatment therapy. Let's say, for example, the bacteriophage. Some countries are starting to use the bacteriophage as alternative to common antibiotics. Vaccination. Yeah, vaccination. People who are vaccinated, they are less likely to get sick. Not only for the bacterial infections, even viral. One of the message I chose, we'll say at the end, it's like people sometimes take antibiotics because of fever, because of flu or cold. And now they are misusing the antibiotics. So people or animals that are vaccinated, they will be less likely to get sick. And if they are not getting sick, they will not need the antimicrobials. So you reduce the pressure to the pathogen. IPC, wash, water sanitation and hygiene. So we have seen it during COVID. Even now in Rwanda, we recently had Marburg, which is still ongoing, but the outbreak is somehow over. We are in the countdown of the remaining days. We have also the monkeypox, but hand washing has been effective in reducing most of the infection, including those associated with antimicrobial resistance. So by hand washing or using sanitizers, you will remove most of the pathogens and you will not get sick. So it's already an effective weapon. Government rules and regulations. Yeah, states and countries should enforce their regulations on proper use of antimicrobials or waste or leftovers or how the antimicrobials are accessed. Also, National Action Plan on AMR. In each country has developed what National Action Plan on AMR. They are there. The issue now is on the implementation, where because sometimes it may need the resources. So countries should reinforce the implementation of their National Action Plan. Research, surveillance, and One Health. Yeah, research is necessary because also surveillance. And not only the phenotypic one, we should reach to the molecular. You may say a pathogen is resistant phenotypically, but when you go to the molecular level, you see the genes, you see the mutation that are associated with that resistance, that will help you now to devise on what are the strategies to combat the antimicrobial resistance. So these are some of the resistance that I used. And this is my message during this WOW 2024. We should not misuse antibiotics and when you have cold or flu, because most of them, those infections are due to viruses. So let's wisely use antibiotics and be the champions, be the ambassadors to wherever you are, to the communities where you serve, to preserve the few antibiotics that we have. Otherwise, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gamani, for taking us through how antimicrobial resistance first develops and the practices that are actually driving it, like underdosing and then not completing treatment courses. So we are very honored to have you here. We want to make sure we make the most of this opportunity. So permit me to just try and get two questions from the participants so that we can now improve our understanding.
Hello, good afternoon. So I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, sir. My name is Mustafa Abdusalam from Nigeria, Ahmadu Bello University Zaria. My question regarding the vaccination. I've heard someone said people are not too sure about vaccination because some vaccinations does not work or they cause future problems in the people that do take them. So there is people are scared of taking vaccine. What do you say about that, sir?
Okay, the vaccine hesitancy has been there and it will always be there, but with it has been improved because maybe if you have most of you have studied, let's say, immunology, we know that normally if you have an infection and you are not vaccinated, it may take 2 weeks for immune response to respond to provide the B cells, the antibodies. But for someone who is vaccinated, because we have what we call memory cells, it means that when you have an infection, in just 5 days, 1 week, your immune response will be able to respond. So maybe it's the problem of awareness. People should be aware. We should promote the awareness of the importance of the vaccines because people have been dying in the previous years when we didn't have enough vaccine. But currently, when the vaccine is there and it has been approved by the WHO, I think there is no need to worry much about. We should be ready to take the vaccines because it is for our safety and the safety of the community. If, let's say, 80% of the community is vaccinated, 20 remaining may not be vaccinated because they will be protected through what we call herd immunity. So it's good to be vaccinated for us to resist most of the infections, including those caused by antimicrobial resistance ones. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we definitely need to do some more education so that we can encourage people to use vaccines more. So we'll take another question from a participant.
All right. Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, but come closer to the mic.
Okay, good afternoon. Good day, everyone. Okay, I would like him to elaborate more as regarding the alternative antimicrobial therapy. Like, what's the meaning of alternative antimicrobial therapy? Are we talking about native or this traditional drug here, or like, I don't get that alternative antimicrobial therapy. Can you recap on that, please?
Actually, there are many. One of them, I mentioned about bacteriophage. Maybe in our countries, we are not familiar with them, but those bacteriophage are viruses that attack bacteria. And they have been used in some countries like Romania. I read like 3 countries where they have been mostly used. That's one. We also talking about the medicinal plants or their pure compounds, essential oils, natural products. Those are also can be used as alternative to the current antibiotics. There are also micropeptides, which are also target specific pathogens. So we have a range of alternative antimicrobial therapy. Even if, let's say, even in light, photodynamic. So they can also be used as alternative to the antimicrobials. Maybe you can search more, but there is a range of also of those alternatives. But maybe their validation has not been successful 100%, but they are there and they can be tested. Thank you.
Okay, thank you too. So we'll be taking the very last question from
Hello.
Belinda. The rest of the questions, and you can send them in the chat box and we will get a response for you later on. Hello, we'll be taking the very last question from Belinda.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I just have a few observations, and I don't know if it will come out as a question, but we will see. I'm glad, Dr. Noel, you have highlighted that 70% of antibiotic consumption is in the livestock department, and you find that there's a lot of antimicrobial transfer or transfer of genetic antimicrobial transfer of antimicrobial genes from animals to humans. And I feel like in terms of advocacy, we are relying or we are concentrating so much on the health sector and we are leaving the agricultural sector behind. Because in terms of transfer, it's mostly coming from the animals and the environment as well. Because these animals, they excrete and it goes to our environment and it goes to our food. And this chain, we are the ones suffering. We as human beings, we are the ones suffering. So I feel like in terms of advocacy, we should change the focus a bit from the health sector and move to the environmental and the animal sector as well, because this is the origin of the transfer. And I don't know if there are alternatives to supplements, because mostly antibiotics are used in the animal sector as animal feeds. So I do not know if there are alternatives to animal feeds other than antibiotics. Maybe you could illuminate on that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for bringing this up again to on the table. Yeah, it's really an issue. And yeah, we have noticed it even in the way we are now handling with with One Health approach.
Yeah.
Even in developing the National Action Plan, we have come together as the health, human health, animal, and also the environment. But I do agree with you, not only in Rwanda, also in different countries, you see that the human sector is somehow advanced. Then comes the animal sector. Then the environmental is still lagging behind. So we need to really improve our advocacy through One Health approach. In some countries, they also have what we call steering committee or coordination mechanism, where the activities are even planned together. Last year, we used to go, even the last 2 years, we used to go to the radio for this during this war, where we were making teams of someone from human sector, someone from the animal sector, and also from the environment, so that the message can be made clear from all groups. So the alternatives I mentioned, especially to be used in the animal feed, some use antibiotics, but some have used, let's say, essential oils. Those essential oils also have the capacity to protect the animals, the livestock, even if better than the antibiotics, because those essential oils, they can even boost the immunity of the livestock. So it's one of the alternatives, and we should continue this advocacy. This can even be seen through the laboratories. For example, in my country, we have few labs in the veterinary, but if you consider humans, there are many labs, bacteriology labs, which can do the bacteriology and also antimicrobial susceptibility testing. So we have a long way to go, but with different initiatives, the Framing Fund, from Pandemic Fund, there are some organizations that are coming in to boost that cooperation, where also the animal sector and environmental sector will also come along with the human to fight antimicrobial resistance. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you very much. You've given us so much to think about. Personally, I would actually go and read more on the use of essential oils. It's very interesting. So thank you once again. So we'll be moving to, sorry, so we'll be moving to the next session. We are trying to keep with time, and I'm really, really excited to be introducing our next speaker, Dr. Tracy Muraya. So she happens to be the Deputy Director for Policy and Strategy at React Africa, and her background is in pharmacy with a specialization in public health, global health policy. So her role at React Africa focuses on monitoring policy developments to provide strategic guidance to align organizational efforts with policy priorities and recommendations, while also promoting adoption and adaptation of evidence-based policy. So a lot of her work is centered around policies. So this provides her with the platform to effectively engage with policymakers and different stakeholders at regional, national, and local levels to both advocate for and support implementation of health systems, strengthening interventions in LMICs, with a special focus on AMR in sub-Saharan Africa. So we know the burden of AMR in sub-Saharan Africa is really, really large. So I'm glad she's going to be speaking to us today. So Dr. Tracy, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be, or good evening. And apologies, I came in a bit late. As with many other regions, we are observing the World Antimicrobial or AMR Awareness Week. And today was our official launch here in Kenya. So I've been tasked with okay. If I could just ask the background noise to mute. And Diane, kindly confirm that you can see my slides now.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Are they in complete or in presenter mode?
So in presentation mode.
Presentation mode. So I should, okay, let me exit. Sorry.
No, so it's fine now. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, you can see full screen?
Yes.
Okay. Are you seeing there's someone scribbling on the screen? Okay, that's interesting. Anyway, so yes, today I've been tasked with taking you through, now that we were all excited and it's been a very, very busy year in terms of the United Nations General Assembly high-level meeting on antimicrobial resistance. All roads were leading to that particular meeting this year. And it's been a very busy year for any AMR stakeholder. But then after the political declaration that was ascended to by our leaders in our member states, now what next, right? So that's when the work really began. So allow me, that's just an outline, but before I deep dive, I will first just talk a little about React. For those who may not know what React is, we are a global network that catalyzes action on antimicrobial resistance. And our vision really is to see our work contributing to a world free from untreatable infections. And then that means that any work we do, the mission is to enable collective action that ensures sustainable and equitable access to effective antibiotics for all. And here, yes, we're saying antibiotics, but of course, we also mean anything else tied to therapeutics, preventives around infectious diseases. And as you can see up there, as React Africa, we turned 10 years sometime this year in April. However, React was actually established in 2005. React Africa is a baby. We are situated across 4 continents now. North America is just now more of our network partner, but not an office anymore. And as I said, we are a global network that really concert our efforts towards addressing antibiotic resistance. Now, what makes REACT unique? We look at the bottom up and top down approach. And that means that to be able to do this, to successfully engage our policymakers at the global level, at the regional level, at national levels, and at the same time, be able to also, like the previous speaker said, some of these things, how do you translate, for instance, how do you work with the community to make sure that whatever is being translated, to the national levels or to the regional and global levels is actually evidence-based, then that's what makes us unique, because we provide advice and ideas as a body of experts in antibiotic resistance, because we're also on ground as implementing partners. And that way we accelerate policy to move, from paper to action, right? And this is encompassed by the research that is being done on ground at facility levels, school levels, even engaging students and youth such as yourselves in the different research arms that you are involved in. And then that way, and of course also as an implementing organization, and that way then we're able to proudly say that we are actually a voice for the global south, to make sure that at the round table, it's not only the global north agenda that only meets its, or rather finds its way there, but it's also aspects that truly engulf our high burden region of infectious diseases, that is. And of course, as we've already had, AMR, we are disproportionately affected by antimicrobial resistance and the deaths that are caused by it. So we work together to develop and implement national action plans across different countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And that way then we're able to actually walk the talk. Now, to the subject matter. Before the UNGA AMR high-level meeting, there were a couple of, or rather a few activities that took place and REACT was able to be involved in. So I'll just highlight the major ones. There was a multi-stakeholder hearing that happened before the UN high-level meeting on AMR, which I will come to in a few. Now, our executive director for Africa, that is Dr. Nathan Pundu, you can see there, and also our director for Europe office, that is Anna Schlblom. They were able to actually attend these multi-stakeholder hearings, where non-state actors as well were given a platform to actually come and say, look, now that we have this draft that is calling itself a political declaration, that our member state leaders will actually come and say that this is what we will work with. What are we saying about it? And also, how do we see it? Does it speak for our people? Does it speak to our people? And even also during the hearings themselves, what really was the outcome of this hearing? And so our colleagues back there came back with three main observations. The starting points between global north, or high-income countries as we usually call them, and the global south, mainly our region, Asia Pacific, also South Americas, are often quite different. And while you have these meetings at high level, for instance, this one was at the UN New York office, it seems everyone in the room is talking the same language. It seems everyone understands AMR. But even as I was just logging in, there were, as the previous presenter was winding up and the questions came about, it's obvious that not everyone in the room understands, the nuances around AMR. And then more to that, we keep talking of we need to do this, we need to do that to address AMR. We need to, for instance, strengthen our infection prevention control. We need to strengthen our water sanitation and hygiene. We need to strengthen our health systems. We need to strengthen, or rather, loop in different stakeholders, including youth such as yourselves when you're in campus or even outside of campus. But where is the money? when we're talking of doing all this, right? COVID was a good example. The world, as it may be, went into, as we like to say, quick, fast, minus slow action. But what happened really when it came to making sure that the needed vaccines are actually reaching the people who need them most back here? That was not the case. The vaccines were actually put in quarters of who is able to pay. Let us supply those who can pay first. And it's the same case we're seeing also with antibiotic resistance, where the expensive last resort reserve medications are generally not available in our setup. Diagnostics are not available in our setups. Most of our labs cannot perform microbiology tests to be able to say patient Tracy is suffering from this particular resistant or rather bag that is resistant to, ceftriaxone. And so she will need, let's just say, meropenem. We generally are not well versed with, or rather well capacitated to say that we can actually perform such tests. And the speaker before spoke to the MAP study, which actually showed that in Africa, we have about 1.3% only of labs that were studied and are able to actually carry out those tests. And then during the same hearings, there was a very vocal TB sector. And look, we are not saying that after all, we've been saying that it has to be coordinated action, multi-sector, multi-stakeholder. So we need TB, we need our counterparts at addressing cancer, for instance. But unlike, for instance, TB, whose voice was very loud at these hearings, AMR will never end. What we are tasked with is to make sure that we slow it down to almost, 0.5 kilometers per hour, if currently it's at 150 kilometers per hour. So these were the observations from our colleagues back there. And when they came back, then we had to rebut, provide a response to the UN high-level people to tell them that, look, while the hearings were a great opportunity and we like what we're seeing from the draft that was there for the political declaration, we still think A, B, and C. And so while we can put that on hold for a moment, so what we saw at the hearings, we were able to actually then respond to the sitting draft political declaration as at that point to say that we agree, we accept what has come from this political declaration or has been stated, but we would also like to see A, B, and C. Now, moving on, that was earlier in May, and now moving on to September when the actual UN General Assembly was taking place in New York. REACT was able to organize two main side events and also participate in others that other different partners had called us for. So what you see in front of you is our side event that was mainly coordinated by Europe and Latin America and Africa as well. And our colleagues at Asia Pacific also came on board, especially when it comes to bringing stakeholders who are very well versed with antimicrobial resistance within the communities to be able to be part of this platform. Now, we pride ourselves at saying that this From People to Leaders Act on AMR Now campaign has actually taken a global platform and was even recognized even at the just ended ministerial high-level meeting on AMR that took place in Saudi Arabia. It's a campaign, or rather it's a global initiative aimed at addressing AMR through mobilizing communities and civil society around the globe for a common call for global concerted action. Now, in the lead up to the high-level meeting, the campaign held the side event that you can see the photos right there, a very successful event that showcased the various roles that civil society and communities play in the global AMR response. And the event featured panel discussions and presentations highlighting successful strategies and innovative approaches to address AMR, emphasizing the integration of AMR into national health policies, because we cannot treat AMR as a silo. We accept that, and we must be cognizant that AMR penetrates into literally all the 17 areas of the sustainable development goals. So we must integrate into, all the areas that we feel or can observe that are either affected directly or indirectly by AMR and vice versa. And so this side event was quite successful, as I said before, and we were able to gather 730 signatures and actually hand over to the UN General Assembly through one of the missions that were back there. Now, why involve the civil society and communities is because of what I spoke to in the very beginning, that apart from the top-down approach, we also use a bottom-up approach, so that now we make sure that such a tool, such a call to action also gets to the high level, so that they're able to see what is on ground at community and civil, or rather, let me just say at community level, so that we also do not pass on declarations that are really more of narratives than those that can be contextualized into our different settings. Then now we also held top-down side event, which was able to gather what we call the Group of 77 and China delegation, and these are different countries that are majorly in the developing regions. And from this very successful event as well, what became, or rather what were the key points that these different representatives, who, by the way, are the mission representatives or are those that reside and work in New York, but are posted to represent our different countries back here. What they came up with and told us they need to see, even if it's a repeat on the political declaration or going forward, is that our National Action Plan implementations strengthened. They are strengthened, and not only that, are actually contextualized, such that we have tailored solutions that address unique challenges in our setup. We need to invest in diagnostics and healthcare infrastructure. We need to enhance global partnerships and collaboration while ensuring that our financing is sustainable, and preferably also start plugging in domestic financing. How do we do this? The call is to ask our parliamentarians, for instance, when those budgets are being read out, could you factor in AMR? Why? Why, they may ask. We've already had it's killing, and it will kill at least 10 million people per year come 2050, if nothing is done, right? But while those figures might also look, okay, that's a very far off time from here. That's why then we also need to invest in the diagnostics so that we get the data to be able to better inform our local situation. And it's the only way really that we will get sustainable financing coming into the AMR, to address AMR in our setups. Then also call for promoting community engagement and awareness to focus on equitable access, not only of antibiotics or antimicrobials, but diagnostics, vaccines, infection prevention control facilities such as hand wash facilities. Other than that, integrate a One Health approach. Just now we had that there's significant use of antimicrobial resistance in the animal sector. And this, of course, I think we may all be aware, also trickles down into the environment. So if we do not really bring in the multi-sector and One Health approach, then really everything else we're talking about, we may be working and we're just going round in circles. There was a call to support local production and supply chains, because as we've all witnessed, COVID did expose the weaknesses in our health systems and the iniquities that come around with that. And if we now get AMR which is the next pandemic, as people say, and as we can see, then what really are we going to do if we cannot even produce the antibiotics that are needed? And that's why we need also to improve the data collection to make sure that we're surveilling and picking on resistant infections that may also be just a problem for our setup and not necessarily for the global north, right? Because remember, even as international bodies such as WHO, when they advise us on the high priority pathogens, for instance, and then research and development is going towards that, while this is informed by robust data, but is that data really coming from our setup? Majority of it is not. So then we need to rethink that, and we need to call our leaders to accountability to make sure that we're actually finding these actions are being put or interventions are being brought to the ground. There was also a call to make sure that we implement policies for responsible antibiotic use. Many of our countries still really lack in policies, but even those that do have, the implementation is quite weak. And mainly the main problem here that was seen, which may not be listed here, regulatory weaknesses that we see, our regulatory and enforcement of sitting laws is quite wanting. Then we need to focus on preventative measures, because research has actually shown if only we, for instance, put in money, very little money, I believe it's way below, I cannot quote the figure right now, but putting insignificant funds towards, for instance, hand hygiene, which is a low hanging fruit, then we actually save almost 200,000 US dollars at just addressing AMR from the research that has been shown currently. And then, of course, now we need to encourage innovation in treatment options. And so these 10 or so points were able to actually also feed into our input at the high-level meeting, albeit the fact that the draft was already there, or rather the political declaration, the final one, was already in place, but we were able to also put this forward. And even going forward in the different avenues that we interact with, are able to bring these points home. Now, other side events that we were involved in before the actual high-level meeting, we were able to also engage with our colleagues at the United Nations Population Fund and the UNITAID. And here really the focus was on safeguarding women's and children's health while fighting antibiotic resistance, because this is also a group that has really been overlooked. Yet we are seeing more and more research showing that there is gender disparities when it comes to contracting infections and going forward to actually contracting a resistant infection, or being in hospital and then now getting a hospital-acquired infection from an infection that was acquired maybe from a UTI, for instance, or as women are actually in our rural areas, they will go wash dishes, a dirty river, exposing themselves to maybe even the water that's there with the kids that are playing there. So this is a majorly overlooked population. And so we thought it best when we were invited to actually go make our voice heard. Now, so we have come from preparing to respond to the zero draft of the political declaration on AMR. And then now we've come to the actual September, when we, in the same week with the high-level meeting, that were able to participate, or rather convene two-side events and even participate in other people's, other funders or stakeholders, side events. And then now we come to the actual high-level meeting itself. Now, the political declaration that was ascended to by our members of state really brought out, and maybe allow me to first skip quickly to that so that we see what it brought out. Now, you may be aware or not aware that the very first political declaration on AMR, which actually galvanized action on AMR that we see in the in the recent years, was declared in 2016. However, this year we found that there were more stakeholders and there was more if I may say, participation from the different member states and different stakeholders. And our member of states, what they agreed to commit to is what really comes as a number one and as should be coming from our different places of work, of living, whenever we come across our states, or rather our leaders up there, is, look, you committed to scaling up action to make sure that the deaths that have been recorded in 2019, up to 5 million deaths because of association with resistant bugs, and up to actually almost 2 million deaths, which was it was reading about 1 point, but those deaths that were actually directly associated with AMR, but you committed to reducing them by 10% in the next 5 years. It's not far. 2030 is just now. In fact, we're getting into December, so we could even say in the next 4 years. But other than that, our leaders agreed to ensure that by 2030, all countries have also developed or updated their national action plans on AMR, and to make sure that also the targets that are being put in place are not as prescriptive as they were before, because before, our countries were really developing national action plans so that it's in line with a global action plan, but not really thinking of, one, where will the money come from? And two, are we even able to do this with our capacity? And then we need to see sustainable, equitable financing and budgeted AMR activities, not just from the usual financing spaces, but then to think of innovative ways, private-public partnership, for instance. Ensure that by 2030, animal vaccination strategies are defined with an implementation plan, including considering the World Organization for Animal Health list of priority diseases for which vaccines could reduce antimicrobial use, because these are not really in place yet. Encourage all countries to report quality surveillance data on both resistance and use of antimicrobials in the next 5 years, and improve access to diagnosis and care so that at least 80% of our countries will be able to test resistance in all bacterial and fungal pathogens, because resistant fungal pathogens are now becoming quite something to really worry about. So we cannot reiterate the need for our leaders to actually walk the talk, and especially because they underscored the importance of political leadership in and beyond the health sector, as I heard from one question, that now we need to start pursuing a whole of society and community-based approach. Now, we have had that. So what happened last week? Our ministers went to Saudi Arabia and came up with 16 commitments. Our member states resolved to translate political declaration on AMR that I just read out into pragmatic, contextualized commitments for urgent action. There's no time to wait. Antimicrobial resistance, as much as it's called or referred to as silent pandemic, is not silent. It's just bubbling under, and it is causing so much if I may say, actually, it's a catastrophe, because many people who may die of resistant infections, you will not see it stated as the cause of death was a resistant infection. No, it will be pneumonia, it will be cancer, it will be TB. But what really led to that? Probably it's an infection that they acquired in hospital, or they managed to move on to a drug-resistant TB infection and actually died of it. So in Jeddah, there were 16 commitments, as I've said. And while I might not read through all of them, you will get the slides. Important to note is that by 2025, the Quadripartite Joint Secretariat has been tasked with putting together a set of experts who will form the independent panel for evidence on action against AMR. And why is this body so important? It's important because really, okay, for starters, they're one of the arms that were recommended back in 2019, if my memory serves me right, I could be wrong, by the interagency coordinating group that had been formed from the approval of the United, actually after the political declaration in 2016. And this particular group advocated for a global leaders group, which is in place now, multi-stakeholder partnership platform, which is in place now, and an independent panel of evidence for evidence on action on AMR. Why? We need independence because we want actual data that we are getting on ground in different regions to actually be transparently, translated up that way to show that, look, while for instance, Kenya, the main issue is hand hygiene, for instance, just saying, the main issue in Nigeria could be actually lab capacity. So it is through this panel for evidence that should not be compromised that we will be able to actually get concrete and evidence-based data as to how the globe needs to act on AMR and what are the, for instance, molecules that we need to work towards researching and developing, as opposed to maybe what is being looked at now. Maybe what is being looked at now is sufficient, or maybe it's not. So if there's anything to take home from the gender commitments, it's that, number one. Number two, I will rush through them because I can see I have 3 minutes now. Actually, yeah, 3 minutes. But also emphasize the ones that we also need to, or rather that were quite interesting in my case, I think. So creation of operational national AMR coordination, One Health mechanisms, which are not in place. Sorry about that. Support collection and reporting of accurate data into global data sharing mechanisms such as the GLASS, AMR, AMC portals, Animuse and Infam in the animal sector. Encourage widespread country-specific implementation of the Codex Alimentarians guidelines and codes of practice. Now, this is key because in the animal sector, as we've already said, there's a huge problem, and this will ensure that there's prudent use of antimicrobials and elimination of use as growth promoters, because this is really a problem in our setting. Establishment of the One Health AMR Learning Hub, which Saudi Arabia actually said it will put in place. So this, it really got me excited. It will focus on sharing best practices and building capacities for implementing multi-sectoral national action plans on AMR. Creation of a regional antimicrobial access and logistics hub to foster sustainable procurement and ensure access to safe and effective antimicrobials. Now, this, everyone should be clapping right now, because if we get this right, and additionally, because the global leaders have also called for investment in our regions for research, innovation, and sustainable manufacturing of antimicrobials and diagnostics, we will be one lot that will be very lucky when AMR, unravels the world as we know it. And we pray to God that we don't get there. We pray to God that we will act as quickly as possible to not to get to that stage. But at the same time, we should be preventing. Strengthen and, where necessary, invest in national and regional life science and biotechnology capacities and appropriate incentives for research, product development, and sustainable manufacturing of novel medicines, that is, new medicines, and innovative vaccines. And here I've also put in brackets, but very important, that also innovative technologies for how to handle waste, because we acknowledge that we really don't know how much. Many of our environmental counterparts ask us, okay, so you're telling us we need to be involved in AMR, and now we're there, we're a quadruplicate, but what is the minimum for instance, penicillins that should go into the waterways, right? So we also now need to think that way as a region. Increase awareness on impactful interventions to mitigate spread of AMR through responsible use and optimal IPC especially. Promote patient-centered AMR policy making through a whole of society approach and strengthening the preventive actions especially. Achieve continuity to these political commitments that keep coming in, but does action really take place? And for this, a ministerial conference has actually asked for a TRECA system, which involves TRECA meaning three, the former, the present, and future presidencies to come together with a technical quadripartite group, that is the World Organization for Animal Health, FAO for the United Nations, and UNEP. For the global high-level ministerial conferences on AMR to hold member state leaders and member states generally accountable for these commitments that we keep making. Where are you at 2 years later? Where are you at 5 years later? We cannot be speaking the same language throughout. And encourage the host country, which by the way, next year, in 2026, sorry, will be in Nigeria. So congratulations, Nigeria, you did it. And for this, they are encouraging for this now ministerial high level to be biannual, because it's through this that we can be talking of from paper to action, not just political declarations or member state representatives sitting and talking and having a conversation and going back to status quo. And so with this is what really concluded the gender commitments that ended just last week. From this, REACT's 5 core points for a new narrative, and this is my last slide. Antibiotic resistance is one of the greatest and most urgent cross-border health crises of our time, but it's still not addressed as such. There's a lot of attention towards climate change, which, by the way, is also aggravating, the rampant spread of even new infections in areas that never had such infections. And so this means we're using more antibiotics and antimicrobials, and as such, AMR is being promoted. Antibiotic resistance reflects the global inequity, and there will be no sustainable development without effective antibiotics. So this underscores the need for also our regions really thinking into self-provision, sustainable financing, and domestic financing at that. Sustainable access to effective antibiotics should be the end goal of global efforts to address antibiotic resistance, as I've just said. Securing effective antibiotics as a common resource is actually a global responsibility. So it's not just the, last resort antibiotics being used and affordable in the global north, but also in our setup. And so that means, ladies and gentlemen, that all hands are needed on deck. It doesn't matter whether you're a student. In fact, it doesn't matter whether you're a medical student, an engineering student, an art student. We all have to be involved in AMR. AMR knows no boundaries. AMR knows no creed. It knows no status. It knows no race. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and I can take up questions. Sorry, I'm 5 minutes over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tracy. I'm very glad you were able to give us insight into the actual context-specific factors that are driving AMR in Ghana. Because to find solutions, you definitely need a good understanding of the problem, especially with something like our diagnostic deficiencies. It's not something we can generalize on the global perspective. So I'm very glad we're able to shed some light on that. I have so many takeaways personally, but I think because of time, we'll just move straight to the questions. So we'll be taking just 2 questions from the participants. So there's a first question here, and it reads, how can youth help in policy making since national action involves our political leaders? That's the first question.
I can go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. The youth can be involved through, in Ghana, for instance, I know you have the antimicrobial resistance coordination body. and that body has technical working groups. And usually the technical working groups in any country will be guided or will be formed as per the strategic objectives that are found in your national action plan. So for many of our countries, the first objective is awareness and creation. And many of our youths actually go ahead to approach the national body to ask, can I be part of this technical working group? If you feel your strength is, for instance, in stewardship, then you'll be in the strategic objective, usually number 4, that addresses optimal use of antibiotics. And that way, you're not only working at country level, but you're actually able to inform policy, because remember, you're part of a technical working group that is informing the national body, which then also meets with the policymakers that are able then to take the conversation forward. And another way we've done it as React, we have actually, I know some of you were here in Nairobi as we were supporting you to actually develop the AMR youth document that went to the UN General Assembly, and the youth was very well represented there. And now also the WHO has the representation of youth from low and middle income countries and even the other regions. So there are quite a number of platforms to actually be able to plug in, and it's just a matter of actually you can go to the React website in our toolbox kit, and even I know Africa CDC. Their website will actually give you information on some of these areas that the youth are really heavily involved and can be able to contribute towards policy. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I believe that was enlightening. So the second question we'll be taking from Mustafa is, are policymakers considering regulating the sales of antibiotics to the public? So maybe he's looking at some further regulation. So if you could address.
Yeah, further revelation. Truth be told, all our countries have laws that actually speak to how antibiotics should be sold, how they should be accessed, etc. It really is a matter of enforcing. So while our policymakers may come and tell us this is a policy, for instance, and this is a framework or guideline towards use and access of antimicrobials, it's now another layer of saying that, for instance, if you dispense, I'm a pharmacist, as you've heard. So if I have a pharmacy and I'm dispensing without a prescription, then I should face the law. But how many of our countries are able to do that? One, our regulatory bodies are not well resourced in terms of human resource, in terms of finances. So it's also quite a task for them to actually go around and make sure that the whole country is adhering. So it starts with you and I. But yes, the policymakers are trying where they can. Africa CDC is also, really trying to work with the member states to see how best then, as a region, we can harmonize our regulatory and make sure that all countries are speaking the same tune, but we're not also inhibiting access to the needed antibiotics when they're needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yes, enforcement, but then it's also good for us to take some steps ourselves, especially those of us who have roles to play around the prescription and dispensing of these antibiotics. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an insightful presentation. So we'll be moving on to the next session, and that's going to be by Dr. Paul Yonga. So he happens to be a consultant infectiologist and clinical epidemiologist, at CA Medilinks Medical Center and Laboratory in Nairobi, where he founded and leads the Infectious Disease and International Health Clinic. And it happens to be one of the largest ambulatory infectious diseases and travel medicine clinics in Kenya. So we know with infectious diseases, yes, there's definitely going to be a lot of antimicrobials used in the management. So he's going to give us a lot of information. So he also happens to serve as a faculty member on the Antimicrobial Stewardship Certificate course by the European Society of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases. And he happens to be a member of the joint ESCMID and European Society of Organ Transplant Clinical Practice Guidelines panel on vaccinations and solid organ transplant recipients. So Dr. Paul is a principal investigator in a number of clinical trials, cohort studies, and compassionate use treatment programs, for which he has received a number of awards, most notably the 2012 New Voices and Global Health and Sustainable Development Award. So it's very evident from what I've read so far that Dr. Paul is a very, very valuable resource person we are going to be having to speak to us today. And I would just encourage all of us to listen attentively while he speaks on AMR and SDGs, addressing a global pandemic for a healthier future. So Dr. Paul, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And thank you to the organizers for the invitation to come in and speak on this very important topic. Please. Let me see. So please tell me if it's full already.
Yes, Dr. It is, so you can go ahead. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So, one of the things I'm going to address over the next 15 minutes is really to provide the link between antimicrobial resistance and the Sustainable Development Goals, how we do address this pandemic, which, if I may call it so, for a healthier future. And so, much of the work that I'll be presenting here is actually derived from the Antimicrobial Resistance and the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework that was developed in 2021. However, you can see that over the last 3 years, a lot of evidence has evolved, and for some of the Sustainable Development Goals, some of this work was not comprehensive for all the development goals. So for the SDGs that will not have been addressed, I'll be offering my own personal opinions on what could be the main issues. So that would be my outline, a bit of the background, and then how the individual sustainable development goals link to antimicrobial resistance, some of the solutions, and some concluding remarks. So a lot of people only talk about 12 sustainable development goals, but there are actually 17 sustainable development goals, tackling everything from poverty to health, to how we interact with our climate and how governance is undertaken in all parts of the world. And so I think I will not belabor this point, as I'm really preaching to the converted, that antimicrobial resistance really causes significant mortality and increased healthcare costs. It threatens food security. Animals lose their lives as well in the process. However, one of the things that we need to be clear about is that if we do not address all, and I mean all the SDGs, because all these SDGs really have a link to increased antimicrobial consumption, whether it could be directly or indirectly leading to antimicrobial resistance, because this increased antimicrobial consumption could either be because of a genuine effect where there's an increase in infectious disease, or it could actually be inappropriate use of these antimicrobials. And so there really needs to be an initiative to meaningfully link antimicrobial resistance to the broader development issues. So looking at issues of One Health, pandemic preparedness, universal health coverage, and also how to develop sustainable food systems. And so the purpose of my talk today is to really move beyond the normal One Health agenda and really broaden it further to involve the concept of circular health. And by circular health, I mean, yes, you look at the environment, you look at human health, you will look at all these things, but you also, in addition, add in issues of finances and add in issues of governance, because all these have an effect on how we address antimicrobial resistance in a much more broader sense. So when you look at the individual sustainable development goals, I'll actually go through each of the 17 sustainable development goals one by one, and you actually see the link between these individual goals and how they link to antimicrobial resistance. So when you look at the SDG 1, which deals with no poverty, of course, when you live in very poor environments, you are more prone to, infectious diseases. Because remember, you're living in environments where issues of water and sanitation may be a bit of an issue. There's a lot of overcrowding. And so because of that, there tends to be a lot of resistant infections spreading much more commonly and much more easily in some of these conditions. And remember, even when people live in such problematic environments with poverty, they are less able to access treatments since they tend to be a lot more costly to them. When you look at SDG focusing on zero on people, getting to zero hunger, one of the things that we need to realize is that there's a lot more increased antimicrobial misuse in livestock, either it is due to breeding or other issues. And because of this, of course, it fuels up the antimicrobial resistance burden. And of course, now when these animals do get infected, these infections are completely untreatable. And of course, now there's a decreased production of these livestock and animals affecting food security. SDG 3 is, I think, what a lot of us more commonly know, since a lot of us are in the healthcare system. And of course, you do notice that annually, slightly over 500,000 deaths are recorded due to drug-resistant infections. When you look at child and infant mortality rates due to infections, specifically pneumonia and resistant bloodstream infections, there is a lot of challenges in reducing that mortality burden because of some of these drug-resistant infections. And of course, when you start dealing with antimicrobial resistance, you tend to have increased treatment costs, because some of the antibiotics that we currently use for some of these drug resistance infections are very expensive. I'll give you an example. If you are treating Pseudomonas aeruginosa that is resistant to your big bug antibiotics such as meropenem, you're spending anywhere close to about $300 per dose. And this one, I'm speaking for an antibiotic like ceftazidime avibactam, where you're supposed to give 3 doses 8 hourly per day, which may go up to a week. So remember, each dose you're spending about $300 US. And most of these antibiotics, you give them in intensive care units. So if you put in the cost of the antibiotic on its own alone, you're spending anywhere close to $1,000 per day only on the antibiotic itself, leaving the bed charges, leaving all the other medications you're using. So it's a very expensive venture when you're dealing with antimicrobial resistance. Of course, when you look at TB, HIV, and malaria, because of the evolution of some of these pathogens, there tends to be a lot of challenges in eliminating some of these infectious diseases. When you look at quality education, when you look at this current framework that was developed in 2021, SDG 4 was not addressed at all in this framework. But of course, there are a lot of issues on how lack of quality education can actually drive antimicrobial resistance and vice versa. And one of the bigger problems is, number one, you're dealing with a very poor knowledge depth, especially when we train healthcare workers pre-service. There tends to be very limited exposure to knowledge on antimicrobial resistance and also on principles of antimicrobial stewardship. But now you can imagine if that is already happening within some of our pre-service training systems, there is also very low awareness on antimicrobial resistance amongst the general population. And unfortunately, also, there's a lot of driven misconceptions on antimicrobial resistance and a lot of over-the-counter use of antimicrobial agents. When you look at gender equality, number one, when some of us treat some of the ladies that come, because ladies tend to be more prone to getting urinary tract infections as opposed to men, and that is due to most of the anatomical makeup systems. So you'll find there's a lot of reproductive health infections, there's a lot of drug-resistant infections, specifically urinary tract infections, more or less than men. And women also tend to be more represented in the professions that could increase the exposure to infectious diseases. And here you're talking about healthcare as well as the teaching professions. Because remember, like for teachers, especially in primary school, you know, a lot of these children tend to have a lot of respiratory infections, which spread like wildfire, especially in schools. And so that a lot more women who are in these professions tend to be more exposed to some of these infections, and that might drive increased antimicrobial use, most of which sometimes may be inappropriate. When you look at men, tend to be a lot more adventurous, so they are more motorcycle riders. They drive a lot of transport vehicles, but also they tend to be a lot more in the military and in the police sectors. And unfortunately, they tend to be a lot more exposed to trauma injuries. And for a lot of these injuries, sometimes over time, they also tend to increase the exposure to drug-resistant infections. When you look at SDG number 6, on issues of clean water and sanitation, I mean, the statistics here are not very interesting to talk about. When you look at 25% of healthcare facilities globally having no access at all to basic water services, 10% of healthcare facilities having no, sanitation services available, and then just about 33% do not even have hand washing facilities at the point of care. I remember walking into a hospital in one of the clinics where I volunteered to do their medical outpatient clinic, and there was no sink in that consultation room. In the vaccination room, it was difficult for any for any hand washing to take place in between vaccination sessions, and that becomes, of course, a big driver of exposure to infection, and most likely most of them tend to be a lot more drug resistant. And lastly, 33% of these healthcare facilities do not have, bins that could be able to segregate waste safely. And so even for the people who come to collect that waste, they tend to be exposed to a lot of these infections due to very poor waste segregation. When you look at affordable and clean energy, which is SDG number 7, this unfortunately has also not been addressed in the 2021 framework. But some of my personal opinions on this is, remember, when you do not have clean energy, if you're using a lot of firewood, that happens in a lot of our rural communities, this of course leads to a lot of air pollution, and this increases your risk of developing chronic respiratory conditions, which unfortunately may, for one reason or another, you tend to get a lot more exposed to infections. Sometimes, if you do not have the infection, if it's not an infectious process going on, you will still somehow end up on an antibiotic for the wrong reasons, hence driving up your antimicrobial resistance burden. The same story will happen with when you look at air pollution as well, which leads to increased global warming because of discharge of fumes into the environment. That, of course, because of the increased global warming, there are a lot more of these natural disasters such as flood and drought. And of course, that of course comes with the attendant waterborne diseases. A good example being the recent Hurricane Helena in the US, which is a high income setting. There are now a lot more reported cases of Vibrio vulnificus infections, which unfortunately has led to the deaths of, I think, about 20 people, over and above the people who already died because of the effects of the hurricane. So this tends to be a very big problem. And of course, when you look at countries within low and middle income settings, we don't unfortunately, we don't capture this data. But you see in some of the high income settings, in addition to the burden of the hurricane, they are also able to capture some of the other mortalities that happen because of the consequences of the hurricane. When you look at SDG 8, focusing on decent work and economic growth, the big problem here is that, of course, if you get some of these problematic infections leading to increased mortality and morbidity, of course, there'll be a reduced labor workforce. And because of that, there'll be a reduced global economic output. And so because of this, that will perpetuate all the other issues that I mentioned, like it will perpetuate the problems regarding achievement of SDG 1, which is no poverty. So a lot of these SDGs tend to be closely interlinked, and that's why I keep referring to the concept of circular health, whereby all these SDGs are interlinked in between each other. When you look at SDG 9, which looks at industry, innovation, and infrastructure, this has been somewhat addressed, but not comprehensively within the framework. And some of the issues, as was highlighted in the previous talks, is that there are a lot of counterfeit antimicrobials in the market. And in addition to that, there are other medications which we tend to use in patients, which may have an impact in terms of drug-to-drug interactions with some of the antimicrobials that we use. And so all these have a bigger impact. And unfortunately, in some of our settings, there tend to be very weak regulatory systems and also very weak surveillance systems, or even no surveillance systems that exist. When you look at SDG 10, which is closely linked with SDG 5, which looks at gender equality. SDG 10 focuses at reduced inequalities within a much more wider context. So here you're looking at refugees, migrants, children, and then people who are employed in certain sectors, such as healthcare, and people who are living in poverty, which is closely linked to SDG number 1. These are populations that tend to be more prone to drug-resistant infections. And of course, because of this exclusion, they tend to have lack of access to healthcare providers. And so because of that, they will tend to access antimicrobials over the counter without any form of advice from a qualified healthcare provider. When you also look at SDG 11, focusing on sustainable cities and communities, this has also been addressed, but unfortunately not exhaustively, because there are a lot of issues that you would focus on when you're looking at SDG 11. Because remember here, there's very poor water and sanitation, and very poor water, sanitation, and hygiene provision. There's a lot of overcrowding. There's a lot of deforestation that is taking place so that people can put up high-rise buildings. And the most important, in fact, the elephant in the room here is corruption, whereby you find that there are, people in some of these bodies tend to turn a blind eye and they give approvals, even for places where approvals should not be given. And of course, all this leads to an increased risk of infections, an increased antimicrobial use, and then, of course, the spread of antimicrobial resistance in cities. When you look at SDG 12, which looks at responsible consumption and production, remember there is very poor antimicrobial consumption behaviors because of a lot of these medications being accessed over the counter, but also very unscrupulous manufacturing companies that release some of these compounds and metabolites from the manufacturing sites without treating them, being released into these wastewaters being released into the environment, and either into our oceans or into our rivers, and which end up being consumed again by the population. Climate action, which is, I think, one of my pet subjects, is you find there's a lot of global warming. Of course, now we know that this results in changing disease patterns. So you find that there's a lot of vector redistributions, especially of the mosquitoes that cause malaria and the mosquitoes that cause other infections such as dengue and chikungunya. Nowadays, we see patients coming from areas where you would not expect to see such infections. But there's also issues about flood and drought, and also certain fungal infections that tend to be a lot more domiciled in the environment, But because of the selective pressure that is taking place within the environment, some of these infections are now finding their way into humans because the environment, the temperatures in the environment and the temperatures within the human body are now almost equivalent. And so they can thrive pretty much in both environments. And then, of course, for some of these climate-sensitive diseases, like I know, for example, I've seen patients who are admitted with dengue, which is a viral infection, but end up on antibiotics because of very poor knowledge amongst even healthcare workers regarding which infection is which. When you look at SDG 14, which is life below water, nowadays, I think there's a lot of aquaculture taking place in a lot of countries. Like I know for us here in Kenya, there's a lot of aquaculture taking place within the lake region as well as in the coastal regions. Unfortunately, they tend to use a lot of medicated feeds, which have a lot of antimicrobials in them. Hence, of course, driving this perpetuating antimicrobial resistance. There's also accumulation of ocean plastics. And of course, with ocean plastics, there tends to be a lot of biofilm formation within those plastic bottles that we throw into oceans, and these tend to be very habitable reservoirs for the resistant bacteria. And then, of course, some of these industries discharging wastewater into our water bodies, hence driving up the antimicrobial population within our water bodies. There's then the life on land, which is SDG 15. This has not completely been addressed in the framework. But one of the things that we need to be conversant with is that because of all these problems that we're facing with regard to, wastewater discharge into the environment, we have wildlife as well, in the environment, which excretes all their waste matter into the environment. There's a lot of selective pressure, especially also with the accumulation of drugs that come from some of these industries. There's a lot of accumulation of drugs that drive up the selective pressure on some of the environmental organisms. And then these environmental organisms tend to start adapting to a lot of these pressures that are being exerted on it. And of course, now that harbors a lot of the pathogens that harbor really a lot of resistance genes. We tend to have very, very dysfunctional public institutions, which is being addressed in SDG 16, which looks at peace, justice, and strong institutions. Unfortunately, this has also not been addressed completely in the 2021 framework. You find that a lot of our regulators tend to be very dysfunctional. They do not know to regulate what is counterfeit and what is real, but also at the same time, there's a lot of corruption within some of these institutions, whereby standards are clearly not being followed, but some of our regulators turn a blind eye to some of these issues. And then, of course, if you have very poor governance in some of these settings, if you had an antimicrobial stewardship system in place, it tends to be less effective because they would not be supported. Or in the worst case scenario, there will not be any antimicrobial stewardship system in place. And lastly, which is SDG 17, as was very clear from the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of protectionism in health technology. So you find that vaccines are coming out, but they are there's a lot of protectionism where you vaccinate a population which at that time were not even eligible for vaccination. Yet some of the people who are eligible for vaccination in low and middle income settings end up not getting that technology. And so there was a lot of protectionism. And so that was not a very clear indication of partnership. And unfortunately, still up to now, we still have a very siloed approach to how we address antimicrobial resistance. So what are some of the solutions? One of the things that we realize, and I'll come back to this clearly, is that we need to have a very circular health approach to antimicrobial resistance. So here you focus beyond One Health. So you look at One Health, but also focus on your built environment. So what you want to do is that you look at the industries that are producing these pharmaceutical compounds. You want to look at the aqua farming, the aquaculture systems that you're looking at down there. You want to look at, your animal husbandry, the way you're dealing with it. You want to look at your sewerage systems, and also you want to look at how do you improve your environment by planting trees, by greening the environment, so that you actually have, systems that can actually absorb the carbon and also reduce on your global warming efforts. So everything that I'm going to present as part of the solution is really centered around how this model is addressed in terms of addressing circular health. And so the first thing is, number one, there needs to be some financial and social protection strategies in place. In Kenya, we do have, I don't know whether it still exists, but we do have a system of protecting our elderly population, whereby they tend to get, monthly stipends that will help them, access healthcare, that will help them, grow better food in their farms. So it's a good system on paper, but in practicality, of course, because of poor governance issues, this is a protection strategy that is under threat. But there are definite other social protection systems that could be in place. Human and animal vaccination is key. I think it needs to be very clear that vaccination is one of the big strategies that over time will really help in mitigating antimicrobial resistance. And then, of course, having robust and sustainable infrastructure in terms of having wastewater treatment and clean energy. In my service alone, when I was building my infectious disease and international health clinic, one of the requirements was that we actually had to install, a wastewater treatment facility, which we actually had to invest in, so that any water that goes into the environment goes, with minimal or absolutely no waste that comes out of either our clinic or our laboratory. The other thing that we really need to invest in is we need to, widespread education. And I think this is where advocacy, and this is where I think our youth groups really would be very, very, very important because I think within the primary and secondary systems, not many of our kids know anything about antimicrobial resistance. And so I think this is one area where there's a lot of behavior change that can actually take place very easily. And then, of course, within our tertiary education spheres, particularly within students who are undertaking life science, higher education courses in the life sciences. I think some training on antimicrobial resistance would be very important. But of course, the bigger widespread issues like tackling corruption and improving governance, that is very key if you are to address this. So that addresses the other the fifth component really of circular health, really tackling some of these other issues that really go beyond biomedical issues. So really improving governance and tackling corruption is extremely important. And then, of course, investing in research and development on antimicrobials, diagnostics, and vaccines. But one of the things I keep preaching is that we really need to break silos. The healthcare sector, the animal sector, the environmental sector, the finance sector, internal security, these people need to collaborate because all these people have some role to play in addressing antimicrobial resistance. And so really to conclude, this framework, for some of you who may be fortunate enough to find yourself on the table when this framework is being revised, I think it would be nice that some of the things that I've mentioned can actually find their way when this framework is being updated at all. But the most important thing is that all SDGs, because I think in a lot of meetings and in a lot of settings, we tend to segregate which SDG to concentrate. Like I know in the health sector, we are completely focused on SDG number 3 and completely forgotten that all the other SDGs have a role to play. But when it comes specifically to antimicrobial resistance, all the SDGs, all the 17 SDGs need to be addressed through advocacy efforts, through research, and also through intensified reading to identify areas where you could have a role to play. Circular health approach is the most viable approach in linking and addressing antimicrobial resistance within the Sustainable Development Goal context. And remember, we only have 5 years to go. So there's a lot of thinking that needs to start taking place on how we are going to contextualize this approach. Of course, there needs to be structured collaborations, but also I know we have the quadripartite group, but one of the things, as was mentioned previously, is that you can have all these bodies, but if you do not have the money, you will not really move anywhere. So one of the things I've been thinking out loud is it time to expand from a quadripartite to actually a pentapartite, whereby you actually involve funding institutions? Because normally when you involve them, it's much easier to extract the money from them, and it's easier for you to build a case for some of these priority areas. And with that, I'll thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. Personally, this was my first time actually hearing about secular health, so it was a very good introduction to that. And it was good to know the way AMR relates with the various SDGs, like its relationship with affordable and clean energy, impacts of gender. And of course, since you're a clinical epidemiologist, it was good for you to speak on climate action, as we know that the environment is one of the parameters in the epidemiological triad. So it was good that you brought in that relationship on how AMR also impacts that. So one of my key takeaways is there are so many SDGs that haven't been touched on or been addressed in any of these plans. And I know in the chat box, we are going to have some follow-up questions on that. So with your permission, I'll just choose 2 questions and then pass them over to you. Okay, so with the first question I have on here from Joel, it reads, given the critical role antimicrobial resistance plays in undermining progress towards the SDGs, particularly SDG 3, which is good health and well-being, SDG 2, zero hunger, and SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. How can policymakers and researchers develop comprehensive strategies to address AMR while overcoming barriers such as weak healthcare infrastructure, insufficient global funding, fragmented data session mechanisms, and cultural resistance to behavioral change? So this is a packed question. I don't know if I should take it again.
No, I think I picked the gist of it.
Okay.
That's when you realize that when you see how packed that question is, it means that there's no one single answer to that particular question. And in some of these things, number one is, first of all, you need to understand the link between antimicrobial resistance and that particular SDG, and then also consider the vice versa link between that particular SDG and the antimicrobial resistance. The minute you figure out that link properly, it is easier for you to determine at which area you as a policymaker would actually intervene. So for example, if I'm looking at issues of like no poverty, and it's clear that people who live in poverty have an increased risk of exposure to infection. I think as a policymaker, one of the things I would need to think through is how possible would it be for me to actually develop or lobby for better financial and social protection systems? How easy and better would it be for me to improve, to assess policies that maybe, for example, would generate employment or work opportunities for people living in such communities? Because at the end of the day, your goal is to get them out of poverty. And of course, when you get them out of poverty, it is easier for you to reduce the risk of them. Of course, you'll not eliminate the risk, but will at least reduce the risk of them actually encountering some of these infections, hence driving up increased antimicrobial use. So I think for me, the bigger thing would be, first of all, understand the link between the AMR and that particular SDG, and also contextualized based on all the other SDGs, because when you understand the link, it is easier for you to intervene in terms of policy, and also by virtue of extending that it also helps you in addressing some of the behavioral components of that. I don't know if I've satisfactorily addressed. It's a very loaded question. I would say I'm not an expert in some of this, because in all these things we really have to collaborate in addressing some of these multi-sectoral issues.
I believe you've done a great job at answering it, actually, because context is also important in understanding these relationships. So the second question I'll be taking, sorry, my video is off. The second question, I found it to be interesting. It reads, how do persons living with disabilities get affected by AMR? I was anticipating hearing more of that on SDG 10. Are they spared the rod, and how do policies cater for them?
Yeah, that's a valid point, to be honest. As I mentioned, some of these policies or some of these frameworks, unfortunately, did not capture some of these people, some of these groups, especially when you look at SDG 10. It talks mostly about, the migrants, talks a lot about the children, it talks about, the refugees, but unfortunately had no mention of people who are able differently. And, this is a population, even by them accessing healthcare facilities, tends to be a bit of a challenge. For them, accessing, even our public transport systems tends to be a bit of a challenge. And of course, those are things really, especially in fact for people who are really in the advocacy space. I think these are the areas I feel you would add a lot more value in advocating for some of these populations. For example, even for people who are abled differently, unfortunately, when they get some of these problematic infections, number one, some of the hospitals that we do have may not even have the facilities to be able to actually enable these people to access the hospital itself. Number two, when they do get hospitalized, sometimes their recovery takes much longer than someone who is well abled. So some of these things, I think we need to be a bit more intentional. I think we need to expand our thinking a bit more and then expound on some of these frameworks, because from that question, it's indeed true that unfortunately these people tend to be wrongfully excluded from some of the strategies. So I think that's a point that is taken quite positively. And I think in subsequent frameworks and in subsequent discussions, these are populations that need to be taken into account so that SDG 10 is fairly complete.
Once again, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Paul. I believe we've all learned a lot today. Thank you. So up next, we are going to be having a little icebreaker session before the following presentation. So just give me a minute to set up.
Okay. Hi, guys. So we are taking a very quick break to break the ice. As you can see, we are going to be engaged in the chat space. So if you can see the screen, we want you to please help us share your ideas. Today's first question is, what is something you think is totally useless, yet you still have it memorized? Some of us have been in school for a number of years. If there's anything at all that you feel like you have studied in this time that you never really use, whatever it is, please leave it in the text space. Let's hear some answers. We'd love to hear what you guys think. My ex's number, wow. Okay, Edwin. Edwin, is that a personal message? I think Edwin's ex needs to be here today. Krebs, Oh, guys, come on. Don't we use the crep cycle anymore? The ABCD song. I mean, I love the ABCD song. Thank you, Suzanne. Parts of an insect. Okay, I think to those who are entomologists, they are enjoying the parts of an insect. Okay. Farm tools and equipment from agricultural school. Okay, maybe if you're into agriculture, you love that. Surface area of rhombus entropy. Oh, you guys. Okay. Third area of a circle. Calculus. Guys, come on. Calculus. Don't you love Pythagoras theorem? Okay, this I agree with. That's a good one. School library textbooks when you have classes from morning to night. Thank you. Head, thorax, abdomen. Okay. The heme synthesis pathway. I think this is still important till date. Helps you understand anemia properly. Providing that the triangle is a triangle in geometry. Okay, long distance trade. All the presidents who've been in my country. Oh, guys, come on. Nigerian national anthem. Okay. Let's keep them coming. Let's keep them coming. Let's keep them coming. I see reproductive system. Please tell me how this is not of any use to anybody. Okay, let's keep them coming. Egyptian food. I kind of like Egyptian food. Diane, don't you like Egyptian food? Anybody else?
To try it.
Yeah, yet to try it. Okay, I'm sure you're going to love it. Pythagoras theory. You know, funny enough, guys, I've used the Pythagoras theory to find a shorter route to a place I was going before. If you don't believe me, you can argue with your phones, but it's true. Trigonometry. Oh, sine and cos everywhere. Circle theory. Uber number plates. Oh, guys. Okay. Canadian Perry's China products are fake. Okay. We have good questions on there. Do we have another question for the day? Do we have another question for the day? Okay. Drawing biology diagrams of insects. Okay, I see you people didn't like drawing back in school. We, the artists, I mean, we're going to say very little because, you know, our drawings are always top notch.
So we have a second question that has been displayed, and this is for, I think, the dreamers, the travelers. And it reads, where would you be right now if you could teleport anywhere in the world? Where would you be right now if you could teleport anywhere in the world?
Diane and I were scoring top of the class. Manchester United.
Hey, am I the only one seeing this? I see in someone's arms. We have, hey, Zanzibar. I'll go with you. Who is going to Zanzibar? I'll go with you. Mauritius, South Africa. Hey, Zanzibar, we are a lot. Oh, I finally see Paris.
Very interesting. Let's keep them there. Okay, Jerusalem, Germany. Good one. South Korea. Nobody wants to be in Ghana. India, USA. Okay. I see. Next to you. Okay. Wanzala, I think you're going to have to respond. Who are you going to be next to? Maybe you're trying to find yourself a partner over here. We can definitely find you one. Carter, my village, Parallel Universe. Okay, I see some sci-fi lovers here. Personally, I'd love to be in the Bahamas. But for those of you who are here, you should definitely be in Harare next year for the 13th AFPS and in Kenya for the World Congress. So definitely consider that. Do we have another question? Last icebreaker question for the day. Last question before we move into the next session, before we move into the next speech for the day. Okay, guys. Everybody's got 10 seconds. You need to guess the movie shows. You need to guess them. So don't put one. If you put one, you don't count. You can't win the session. You need to put all 4. So you start from top left to top right to bottom left to bottom right. Please put that in the space. Our tech specialists are going to be watching. The first person to get it correct is going to win something from the RPO today. Okay, we're seeing some comments. Some movie lovers. Guys, if you type them in singles, it's going to be difficult to pick a winner. So if you can put them all together. Someone says I've politely failed. Okay. All right, we're seeing Black Panther, Prison Break. Anybody to get the bottom right? Okay, I see one person in there. Let's keep the responses coming. Guys, you guys watch movies. You guys watch a lot of movies. Okay. That's good. Do we have any Dora the Explorer lovers here? Diane is a Dora the Explorer lover. Anybody else? Okay, all
I'm
right.
going to ignore that.
I think we've got a few winners for the day. Thank you. Thank you all so much. So the winners will be identified. So please be checking your mail after here. When we're done with this session, you are going to fill some feedback forms. And after the feedback forms, please keep an eye out. If you get a mail from us that you won one of our mini sessions during this program, please know that you're expecting something from Afro. Who knows? Could be mailed to your door, could appear to you in a dream, or any of the above. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do we have any more movies before we switch to the next speaker for the day? Okay. Thank you so much, guys, for being a part of this icebreaker session. We really appreciate your enthusiasm, your excitement in the tech space. You guys are wonderful. Okay, now we want to move straight into the next session. We promise we are wrapping up. But right before we wrap up, we just need 5 people to type in the text space one important thing that they have learned today. Of all the speakers who have come so far, anything you have taken home, just leave it in the text space. We've got just 2 minutes to do that. We want to make sure that we are actually listening. You know, I saw a couple of us have left the camp. Make sure that you are things that we are learning here, because there's no point we hold these meetings if we are just listening and not taking anything away with us. It's a call to action that all of us have. So we need to make sure that we are taking stuff away. So let's have some comments. What is your favorite thing from today's session? What have you learned? Let's keep them coming, guys. Diane, what's your favorite thing from today's session?
That's my mind. So my favorite thing from today's session, I'll say when Dr. Tracy was speaking about how in addressing AMR, we really have to make it context specific. Because sometimes I see some advocacy campaigns and things that they are speaking about, I feel like they won't really apply maybe that well in Africa. Like if we are looking at focusing more on bacteriophage therapy, how are we even going to store like stuff like that when we can look at simpler things like hand washing, etc. So far that's my favorite thing. Yeah.
Go you. Okay. Thank you, Diane. Thank you all so much for sharing. Really appreciate you guys. Now we're up to our next speaker session, and we have in our midst Dr. Sophonias Tesima. Now, Dr. Sophonias Tesima is a researcher and currently serves as the program lead for the pathogen genomics at Africa CDC. If I decide to read his bio or his profile, guys, we're not going to close this meeting today. So I'm going to allow him to do just a few tidbits. He's going to come in and tell us what he has for us. But for the meantime, Dr. Sophonias Tesima, please let's give him a round of applause. Dr. Tassima, the platform is all yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Can you hear me and can you see my slides?
Loud and clear. We can see your slides as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I really loved the session and it was very interesting and lots of really good answers for your questions as well from the participants. So my name is Sophonius. I work at the Africa CDC and I lead the genomics program. What I will do today is I will not speak too much, but I will really try to send a message, especially for the young people of Africa. How do we unlock the power of genomics to tackle, respond to the AMR threats? At Africa CDC, we have a genomics program, and I will not go into the basics of genomics and all those things, but we really think empowering African public health institutions in detecting and monitoring AMR is very critical. So we have our new strategic plan, which talks about strengthening laboratory capacities to have member states to have capacity for surveillance and early warning system, which is critical in quantifying the burdens of AMR, in identifying and detecting AMRs very early or any other outbreak very early, but not only detecting it, but characterizing it and also reporting is also critical. We also have a program that's striving to strengthen laboratory capacities for clinical services. All of these are, the focus is how do we strengthen the capacity to strengthen detection and testing capacity in the continent. We have different programs to achieve this. We have programs that are building foundational capacity. We have programs, as you heard from the previous speakers, there are gaps, shortage of diagnostics. Some of the gaps and the shortages are related to economy, but others are related to regulatory factors. Others are related to supply chain. All of this was earlier discussed. So we have a program that's trying to address access to diagnostics. We have also programs which talks about mapping and optimizing laboratory networks as a continent. How do we work together? How do we collaborate together? How do we network each other between different countries, with countries which have good capacity, other countries have low or limited capacity? As you heard from the previous speakers, they were talking about context. So we are trying to really think about how do we contextualize the continental capacity and connect countries together. And today I will be focusing on the fourth component, which is the molecular genomics and bioinformatics capacity. Africa CDC, when it was established in 2017, 1 year later, we started a program called Genomics. The whole idea is how do we enhance member states' capacities? How do we leapfrog member states' capacity for molecular detection, genomics detection, bioinformatics, for in general for disease surveillance, whether it's outbreak detection, AMR, or any other disease burden that we have in Africa. So that's the focus of our program, where our major focus is how do we strengthen the capacities to enhance genomics, molecular detection, and bioinformatics across the African continent, across member states, which have a variety level of capacity. As we speak, genomics is being deployed in Africa for different use cases. We are using genomics for example, if you remember COVID and the different variants, the Omicron, the Alpha, the Beta, that was detected using genomic surveillances. Recently, in the monkeypox outbreak that is ongoing, you probably heard about clade 1, clade 1B, clade 1A. All of this is also using genomics surveillance. We are also aspiring to strengthen genomic surveillance for AMR, for cholera, malaria, vaccine preventable diseases. There are different activities that are ongoing in the continent to strengthen capacity for genomic surveillance for all these different diseases. But why AMR is very important? As part of all these use cases that are listed here, I'll focus on the AMR component for today. And why it's important, I think this has been said a lot again and again. Most of you understand what the burden of AMR is. But what I will really focus on is we have challenge in completeness of data. Antimicrobial resistance in 2019, it's more than 1.22 million people have died or associated days from AMR. Africa has the largest mortality rate from AMR. But all of this information that we hear about AMR is mostly coming from data that is incomplete, whether it's on AMR, it's also incomplete on the antimicrobial consumption side. So how do we improve data quality, surveillance? In some sites, we don't even have any information about the level and the scale of AMR in the continent. There was a recent report. I really recommend all of you to have a look if you haven't yet. This report, The Crisis Within the Crisis. As you can see the title of the report, it says Incomplete AMR Resistance Data. So the data that we have is incomplete, but even this incomplete data shows a very grave concern about AMR in the continent. As you can see, this is a report from 14 countries. Only 1.3% of laboratories in these countries have a regular routine bacteriological testing. 80% of the laboratories, they conduct less than 1,000 tests per year for AMR. And when they test, they only test for 5 out of the 15 priority pathogens, AMR priority pathogens that are listed by WHO. So all of this shows that there is a grave concern around data. All what we talk about is there is poor surveillance, there is limited information about AMR in the continent. Another survey which was conducted and published in 2023, it was a systematic review of surveillance data. I will not go into the details of this, but just look at out of 4,300 records, only 32 met initial inclusion criteria. The inclusion criteria was not very strict. This is just showing you that the data that we have is very incomplete. And they highlighted the limited reporting of parameters is a big challenge in the continent. So how do we address the challenge of limited surveillance, the challenge of poor quality data, and how do we improve the overall AMR surveillance in the continent? I will not talk about the challenge, but rather what are the opportunities. So here, what I would really like all of you who have an interest in AMR to really think about how can we bridge genomics, which is an emerging technology which helps us to quickly detect AMR, with a routine AMR surveillance for public health impact. There is a possibility, but there are different barriers. We have different recommendations. And this recent series from the Lancet group, you can find this paper, which really outlines all the critical gaps and then also the best recommendations that we can have to link between genomics and AMR in settings like Africa. After this, what I'll really try to do, we are getting closer in linking these two components, the genomic surveillance and AMR surveillance. I will talk about what are the enablers that we have and how do we leverage the use in Africa to actually link these two different solutions. We have AMR surveillance for public health that's immediately needed, urgently needed. And we have a growing genomic surveillance capability in Africa. So linking the two will really give us what we need in order to control and track AMR in the continent. So I'll talk about a few enablers, enablers that will help us to link the two, the genomic surveillance and AMR surveillance in Africa. The first one is in 2020, as part of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are able to establish a continental network of laboratories. I will not go into the details, but we have different countries which have different levels of genomic surveillance capacity. Some of them are really good, some of them are beginners. So what we did in 2020 is we tried to link these countries. If South Africa has a better capacity and another country has a limited capacity, that country with limited capacity can leverage the capacity of South Africa. This is really the essence of this continental network. And recently, this is actually an approach that was recommended by experts for AMR surveillance, linking AMR surveillance with genomic surveillance in low-income settings. So we have an established continental system that can be leveraged for AMR surveillance. It's not yet fully leveraged, but this is an enabler that we can leverage for genomic surveillance of AMR in Africa. The second one is genomics capacity is expanding in Africa. This is a second enabler. As you can see between these two maps in 2019 versus in 2024, Africa as a continent had a rapid expansion of genomic sequencing capacity during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was accelerated by COVID-19 pandemic. As you can see, most countries are now building genomics capacity locally, so they will not be dependent on others. But this capacity has to mature. We still have a lot of work to do, but we are seeing a very rapid expansion of capacity. What this means is that the sequencing capacity is getting closer to national public health institutions, which are expected to conduct AMR testing. So there is more and more growth of capacity, but within this green color. So red is no capacity, green is there is some level of capacity. As you can see, there is a significant shift in the map, and we are really working hard to make by 2025 all African countries to have this capability. But what does that mean? This capacity needs to be leveraged for AMR. Having a capacity, having the equipment, having the labs doesn't translate into a result. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done in order to ensure that this capacity is leveraged for AMR surveillance in the continent. But at least this capacity, which was far, far from Africa in 2019, 2018, is now in the continent. It is, it's here. The third area that I think is also a big enabler for us is an increasing workforce, which I think I would really like to thank all the youth of Africa, because a lot of these trainees and a lot of these staffs of national public health institutions, national reference laboratories who are working on genomics are the continental young people who are dedicating their effort and their time to establish and expand this capacity. So in the past few years, because this technology is new to the continent, we've been working very hard with all our partners to expand training opportunities. So far, we have conducted about 68 trainings, 1,100 experts were trained. These are coming from all the 54 member states except one, and 40%. We are also trying to be cautious about the gender gap, and still we have a lot of work to do to fully balance it, but we have 40% of females trained in our training program. So these training programs are creating opportunities for the youth and for the younger people, for the laboratory technicians, for the bioinformaticians to be able to train on this technology, to apply it for different use cases, including AMR. Over the years, we have also been working on context. I think this is another enabler. For the past 2-3 years, we've been working with experts across the continent we asked a simple question. If we have genomics capacity in Africa, what do we need to do? Which priority use cases do we apply? As you can see, the one which is highlighted in red, AMR came first, is one of the top ones. And our experts helped us to define specific use cases. For example, in neonatal sepsis, or it's Salmonella typhi, or One Health surveillance. We asked them, can we apply genomics on these use cases? Well, for which AMR it's ready to go in the continent, considering the limitations that we have as a beginner, as an emerging applicants of this technology for AMR surveillance. So we have our priorities defined based on our context, based on our needs, based on our readiness for AMR surveillance. And after we identified these priorities, we and others, many others, are currently demonstrating and conducting some pilot studies. Can we apply genomics for AMR? What does it take to apply? What are the gaps? What do we need to think about? All of this is currently being defined, and we have a project that's ongoing in 9 countries to define some of these areas of needs to strengthen genomics for AMR surveillance. But there are also several other programs, PulseNet Africa, Seek Africa, Global Health Research Units. They are really conducting a lot of very good demonstration studies, which will help us to leverage on in expanding AMR surveillance in the continent. The other big barriers, and which I think is an opportunity for the young people of Africa, is data. Data science, data analytics is a big challenge. We have recently wrote a detailed report on what we see as a challenge, and also some of the solutions that we are proposing. Whether it's the governance of data, whether it's the quality of the data standards, the bioinformatics capacity, the infrastructure, whether it's the computers that are needed or the power that's needed to conduct the analysis, or the solutions, the different bioinformatics solutions. All of these are identified as barriers. But I would really don't want to focus on the barriers, but these are opportunities in terms of addressing the continental genomic data gap and bioinformatics gap. So we are working with our partners in countries and member states in terms of addressing some of these challenges. Whether it's we are creating access to cloud-based platforms. In some countries, we are connecting the laboratories with Starlink internet, because internet is sometimes a big challenge to transmit data and share data, move data from one side to the other, especially in rural settings where access to internet is limited. We are also conducting a lot of trainings to help train as many people as we can, and then also creating some standards to data. But this is an area where I think I would like to challenge the young people of Africa to really focus and build your capacity on, because we have significant shortage of capacity. And if you go to this manuscript, you can see we have quantified the needs in terms of bioinformaticians. It's a rough estimate, but we have a significant shortage of data scientists and bioinformaticians in the continent. So for the way forward for AMR genomic surveillance are twofold. One is it must be multisectoral. I think this was said multiple times. Whether it's public health teams, laboratories, clinician, industry, Ministry of Health, or Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment, or this must be a multisectoral approach. So this multisectoral approach and the connection between them, it looks a bit complex, but we really need to think multisectorally, and that multisectoral approach can only lead us to a better solution in AMR surveillance. The second area is we really need to think about innovations on application of technologies like genomics for AMR, or applications of AI and machine learning in predicting AMR, or even in the discovery of drugs. So there is a lot that needs to be done in the innovation space, but the future is multisectoral, and we really need to think about what kind of innovations will be applicable. As it was said earlier, we also need to think about context. Our multisectoral partnerships, our new innovations must be contextualized to our needs, what we can do with the resources that we have at this time. So as a conclusion, I think active engagement of use and advocacy by use on antimicrobial use is really critical. And it's your innovation, it's your leapfrogging and thinking and discovery can only lead to an improved AMR surveillance in the continent, including genomic surveillance. It's one of the tools, but we can think of multiple tools that can be contextualized for Africa. And I really call for all of you to rise to this challenge of the silent pandemic. At least we can make it a non-silent or loud pandemic, right? That's possible to do it by advocacy, by efforts from all of you that you are working on this space. And then also really to think about the solutions and to address the threats of AMR. One of the solutions is improving data quality, improving surveillance, measuring the burden, measuring the challenge and the threat that we have. So as a message, I think as part of this year's theme, we need to educate, we need to advocate, but most importantly, We need to act now. And all of us together, I think we can achieve something meaningful in strengthening genomic surveillance in general in measuring the AMR burden in Africa. Thank you very much, and over to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sophonias. This was a really, really good presentation, and I'm sure the participants are eager to follow up with questions because we really need to find ways where youth can contribute, yes, but also quantify the AMR burden in Africa. So I'll be moving over to the chat box so we can just go straight into the questions. So I have a first question here, and it reads, please say, how can genomics be applied in solving the contribution of Africa genetic diversity in the spread of AMR? That's the first question.
Thank you very much. I think it's both ways. First, understanding the diversity of the human population also plays an important role on and our understanding of how resistance actually develops. And the second part is also understanding of the genetic diversity of pathogens. For example, for some of the high burden pathogens, we don't have sufficient genetic data to understand how diverse are they. Do we see any diversity? Do we have different patterns of AMR genotypes in the continent? We have very limited understanding, but in general, knowing the genetic diversity will help us. Genetic diversity by itself may not be the solution, or may not give us the full understanding and the full information. Always, genotype needs to be linked with phenotype. Does it have an implication? For example, if we see a genetic marker, is that genetic marker associated with resistance? We don't know until we test and actually prove that that genetic marker is associated with resistance. So it can give us some of the information that we need to understand how drug interactions work, but also in understanding how pathogens become resistant. But genotype by itself and alone may not be the best data. It needs to be linked with some phenotypic data. So I think it will give us information, but not always complete. But once the genetic marker is associated with resistance, once we know that this is a marker of resistance, then it's easier to measure, it's cheaper to measure, it's faster to measure, rather than a phenotypic analysis that we do currently. Of course, we have some challenge in scaling up these measures, but we definitely can expand and scale up genotypic surveillance, especially for those known markers of resistance.
Okay, thank you for that comprehensive response. We have a second question as well, and it reads, it's quite vital to involve the youth in AMR education. What we lack in Africa is sufficient funding to help on such programs. Are there any plans to increase such funding to encompass the majority of the youth in Africa? So over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think this is where we need the use. This is where we need to advocate, because we have a silent pandemic that is ongoing. We have people who are interested, young people who are interested to be trained. We don't have shortage of trainees, but the shortage is on the funding. The shortage is on the attention. I think that is where we need to advocate. For example, when we announce a training for 20 participants, we get applications of up to 4,000, 5,000 applicants. And it's really heartbreaking to drop a lot of good candidates because we only have funding for 20 people out of the 5,000, which is totally not fair. So this is why we need to advocate. I think the young people need to join the advocacy of increasing funding for AMR, increasing funding for genomics, especially in training the young people to really take over and support and expand and strengthen surveillance in the continent. So what I would say is there is an improvement in terms of funding, but really we need to advocate more because we have a lot of smart and trainable young people in the continent with very limited opportunities. So how do we increase that opportunity? That's what we are trying to do. But we need all of you, all of us to work together and advocate in increasing opportunities for more people and for more young people to be trained, especially in areas like genomic surveillance. We need the young people. It's a new technology, so the young people should be trained on this. But for us to train more and for more and more people to be trained, we need to advocate. We need to advocate for more funding in whatever way we can. In all possible mechanisms, we need to advocate and push for more resources to be allocated for trainings.
So I believe we all heard that we need to advocate, we need to push for more resources. So I'll be taking one last question. Wow, there are actually a number of them. But I'll be taking one last question, and it reads, is there any possible link between AMR and GMO? Please expand on this. Thank you. So over to you.
Yeah, so between AMR and GMO, I think it will be difficult to generalize on general genetically modified organisms. We really need to be very specific because GMOs have their own disadvantage and in some cases advantage, but we need to be very specific about for which specific GMOs are linked with AMR. There might be a possibility, but this is not, it's very difficult to speak more unless we go into a very specific examples. Because of time, maybe we can email or you can email me and we can have further discussions on this specific questions.
Okay, I believe that would be good. So thank you once again so much. And this has given us a number of things to think about and places where we can actually direct our advocacy efforts towards. Thank you for your time. So we'll be moving
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we'll be moving to the final session for the day. It's going to be taken by Mr. Elvis Ocheng. So Mr. Elvis is a Kenyan and passionate advocate for social change who graduated from Egerton University in 2019 with a degree in gender studies. So he happens to have a keen interest in public health and undertook a specialized HIV testing and counseling course offered by the National AIDS and STI Control Program, which equipped him with skills to contribute to health initiatives in his community. So his work mainly focuses on reproductive health and youth development, and he has actively engaged in creating awareness and empowering young people. So he happens to be a member of the Global Peace Foundation, where he advocates for harmony and collaboration amongst communities. Now, in addition, he's a proud member of the IARA AMR Task Force, which contributes to youth policy development and initiatives aimed at combating antimicrobial resistance. I believe some of the organizations here, the youth organizations here, also happen to be a part of the task force. So through his dedication to health, peace, and youth empowerment, he continues to make a significant impact, striving to create a better future for his community and beyond. So, Mr. Elvis, we are pleased to have you speak on the role of African youth in the policy development and advocacy in AMR, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello. I'm working on my skill, then I'm sharing right now.
So Mr. Elvis will be starting soon. Sorry, we'll be setting up the slide shortly, so just give us about 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, are you getting me?
Yes, please. So you can go ahead now. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had an issue with my screen. Today, I will be taking you through the role of African youth in policy development and advocacy in AMR. As you all know that right now we are talking about youth engagement in AMR. So today, I'll be taking you through in different policies that we are aiming at for the youth to advocate for. Okay, first of all, as we all know that a global issue all over Africa. If we start on health policy, be it in public policy, be it in private policy or formal and informal policies, AMR have become global issue. So I will be taking you okay, first, I will be starting by introducing what is policy. Are you getting me?
It's just I don't know how they're taking the attendance.
Yes.
Yes, we are. Yes, please, we are getting you. The slide is also currently on policy.
I hate. Is this man serious? Oh, Jesus. What country is he from?
Okay, I'm having a
Oh,
problem
she's
with my
asking me if I
screen.
found excuse to leave the house tomorrow. Yes, because I told her just allow me to go out like that.
Precious, kindly mute.
But the way mommy is vibing like this, it be like say if you want to promote herself, she go allow you.
Okay, let's go on. Okay,
Yes, now.
policy is a structure set on
She's, like,
guidelines
she's
to
ready.
establish.
She's ready to allow you to meet new people.
Policy is a structure set or guidelines to achieve intended outcomes. Yes. So in every organization or in every country or in every program, we have policy. So policy is a structure where we set our guidelines and are established, be it by government body to direct decision making and achieve intended outcome. In whatever we do, we have outcome that we need to come out with to have. So for example, in our AMR program, we have an outcome we want to come out with. So that was policy. One, I will start with health policy where we want to involve youth. How can youth be involved in advocating for in health policies? One, we can include youth in AMR topics in medical, nursing, and public health courses, whereby in our curriculum, we can make sure we have an AMR topics, because most likely if you say in our medical school or nursing or public health courses, you will find that there's a gap on AMR. There's nowhere AMR is included. So if we make sure that we have AMR in our, if we make sure we have AMR in our topics in medicine and nursing, the youth when growing up will understand what we should do. Again, we can include workshops and seminars in the public health facility where we'll have workshop, seminars, educate them on AMR. Conduct youth integrated and targeted seminars as AMR challenges and strategies in health sector. This will also enable youth, because I'm talking under youth policy. This will enable youth to get information. So we'll target youth in seminar and AMR so that we can mitigate challenges and get strategy in health sector. Two, I'll be tackling public policy. Okay, when I'm talking about public policy, this is where we talk about on what we should do. For example, let me start with the improper disposal of medicine. As you all know that most of facilities have improper disposal of medicine, where we have bioaccumulation of this antibiotic in the environment, which can accumulate in plants and animals indirectly and expose us and can be exposed in human, because I'm very sure after this, each and every one of you here is going either to consume meat, vegetable, and also may take water. If we dispose this medicine very poor, they can go into the soil, some will go into water, and this might bring health hazard in us. So as youth, if we include youth in public, where we train them on how we can have better disposal, especially in public facilities, private facilities, for the health sectors, so that they can have a good knowledge on how to dispose this medicine. And again, when we are going again on private policy, whereby we can get these people on agriculture, where we can have amendment on how to use animal products, agricultural product, pesticides. For example, most likely we find out that we misuse drugs. not long ago, I met somebody who is taking, sorry to say, ARV drugs, injecting on pigs so that they can grow. Coming again, this might bring issue on our health. So if youth are trained, you can go in grassroots level, training people on the effect of using these drugs on animals and curb this issue on AMR on us. I will again take you on the private sector. Why am I saying private sector? Most likely the private sector have wide range of interaction and information. Like when we're talking about something like the NGOs, if we engage with people like NGOs, they can help us in advocacy and to amplify AMR related messages, whereby mostly we find that we go to schools. I met a student whereby he was sick. When I asked him what was the problem, he told me there's a friend who has a medicine and they are sharing the same disease. So when the youth are sick, most likely they share the same medicine. Not only youth, even our old parents at home. When a child has a fever and the other one has a fever, they say they share the medicine. So if you have youth going inside the families and grassroots level by help of the private sectors, NGOs, will have a lot of things that will have given by awareness, by education. So I will go on formal and informal policy. This is where we talk about education. Why am I saying education? Everything that affects us is due to lack of information. If you have youth alliance form groups to operate at both the level, working formally with government, youth can work on social media advocacy like Twitter or LinkedIn. Some of them can participate in global forum and bring back ideas to adapt and implement local features. We can have education initiative like training session on AMR for peers and community member to increase awareness. We can also use youth to conduct surveys. If we have youth to conduct surveys to collect data on antibiotic use and resistance. We might assume that we have all the information needed on AMR. By taking survey, you can get more information and get that we had a lot of gap on issue on AMR. So through formal education on awareness, giving youth chance to go and take data on the grassroots levels will be one of the best things we can have. And again, substantive and procedural policies. If you have a procedural policy whereby we have body that is structured, that can help us go in, by if you have pharmaceutical sectors where we can go with to at least every facility. Let me talk about facility because these are these are the places whereby we take our drugs, and this is where we can get the information. And this is where, if we are not given information, we'll come out here and misuse the drug. So if at every facility we can have an ambassador, youth ambassador in every facility, whereby we'll be talking about AMR and giving procedural policies on what should be done. And these are people who can be as our watchdog there, who will be giving us information of what is happening and what we should amend and what we can do. And again, I have the last policy called distributive and regulatory policy. This policy, I think they are the best. In anything, if you don't have regulation, everything will be misused. Now, for instance, right now we are having drugs have refused to work on our body. They have to take effect on our blood. They have failed even to cure our antibacterial, the antifungals and the rest. They have failed to work. Why? Because the regulatory system that we have is corruption. So if they go to every pharmacy, poison seed and medicine board in Kenya, for example, whereby they go to every pharmacy checking out on the medicine, you will find out that they can go over the counter and found that the pharmacist is not qualified. The pharmacist is selling something that is not supposed to be consumed. And just because of corruption, they will not regulate that. The pharmacist will come again and sell that medicine that is not supposed to be sold to a patient. When this patient consumes the medicine, this is where we get issue. This facility or this pharmacist or the other community health center, they don't have disposal system that is good. But because we don't have a good regulatory system, they will dispose them poorly on our soil. Some of them will dispose them even in our rivers, on which this river will consume the water, or some of them will use the water to irrigate the same plants and also water the animals that we will eat. So if we have a good regulatory, distributive and distributive policy, by engaging youth who are random and strong and can go anywhere and give us information and make people be aware of the effect of not having a good regulatory policies, I think we will step ahead. I will be going to the next slide. Stages of policy development. First, we have agenda setting. After agenda setting, I will explain later. First, we have agenda setting. Secondly, we have policy formulation. After that, have decision making. Then after there, we have implementation. Fifth, we have evaluation. Why are we saying we should have agenda setting as one? Before doing everything, we should have an agenda. What am I doing and why am I supposed to do this? That's an agenda. My agenda, for example, is on to curb AMR by youth advocacy. After my agenda, I should have what policy formulation should I have? What am I supposed to do after having my agenda? You create a policy. My policy should include what am I supposed to do? Who should I engage? What am I supposed to tackle? The mitigation that will come after that. After that, you should have decision making. Why am I saying decision making? This is after having policy formulation and getting all the information. This is the decision I should make. For example, if I find out that people who misuse drugs are youth and old people, what decision should I do? Create awareness to these people, engage them in AMR training, have an ambassador where we'll be taking them through. That's how we have stages of policy development. Number 4, whereby we have implementation. Now this is where we implement whatever we found after having policy formulation. Then we have decision making. We have made our decision. Now we should implement. How are we going to implement this? This is where now you do your research before you implement it. You go and know, where should I implement this? You go to an area where, let's say, most of them don't go to hospital. For example, I'm sorry to say there are some people who don't believe in medicine, and they are spreading diseases in and out. So I'm going to do an implementation on this area. And what am I going to implement on this area? For example, we are going to implement on AMR, whereby people are misusing drugs. We will involve the people who are pharmacists, doctors, youths, and we are forgetting the people who are living with disability. And also, before we forget, we can also involve the old, because when we are tackling AMR, about the old people are the people who also misuse the drug because they don't have the information. They believe the drug can be shared. So this is where we implement, and these are the people how do you come back, sit down. This is how we evaluate our information, and this is what the outcome comes. And if possible, we can engage the duty bearers that are supposed to be in, like the government, like the doctors, and also we can engage the youth and the old, for example, if they are the people who misuse, because that will be the affirmative action that will be needed as per there. Thank you. I will be taking you next. We go to the next slide so that we can go and deep and discuss more. Areas of youth engagement in policy. Problem identification and agenda setting. Conducting research and survey. Gathering data about issues affecting young people. Young people most likely are left out in most decision making. And to be truthful, us as youth, if you leave us out, you'll find out that you miss some information. So if we engage youth in problem identification and agenda setting, we'll have information and we can identify more gaps that we even didn't know. 2, organizing awareness campaign using social media, event, petition, and highlighting important issues. Why are we saying using social media? Most of youth are found on social media. Like right now, if you go to either Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, who are there? They are the youth. So if you organize an awareness campaign, creating flyers, creating short videos, and posting them on social media event, creating petition and highlighting important issue for them to be able to read and learn through social media. Contracting elected officials, sharing personal stories, and advocating for change. Now, the official, let's say, for example, our areas in Kenya, we have area MP and area MCAs. We can involve them by sharing our personal story, and through them, we can be able to have change by letting them, for example, if they have a forum, they can give us a chance to talk about the matter affecting youth on issue on AMR, on advocating on AMR, by giving information to our parents, to giving information to our fellow youth, by giving information to everybody, including the religion that doesn't allow people to use drugs, including people who are in agricultural sector who misuses drugs, so that we can have a clear picture on what is happening on our ground and grassroots level. We will be taking, I will go to the next slide now. Number 2, policy formulation. Participating in youth forum and consultation, sharing ideas and perspective on policy solution, developing policy proposal and recommendation. Most likely we youths, we are full of ideas, and you all know here when you are here listening to me, we are full of ideas, but we don't have a place where we can share our idea. But if we have a chance to participate in youth forum and consultation, you can be able to get new and related idea from us. Through this idea, we can get solution for this policy. Developing policy proposal and recommendation, researching best practices and suggesting innovative approaches. Like 90% of youths. Can you meet please? Youth are in the education sector, be it in tertiary, be it in university, be it anywhere. We are mostly in education sector. We do research, we do proposal. Through this, we can be able to be involved so that we can do research and proposal on matter on AMR, on how we can mitigate the issue on AMR, on how we can implement matters that can bring better solution. Joining youth advisory board or council, providing input on policy making on issue related to young people. Young people, most of us, most of the young people have energy, and if this energy it's not utilized, that's where you find most of them are misusing drug out there. Like for example, there's this drug called Cosmo. Cosmo, I saw it, they are misusing it. Why? These people have energy and they misuse drug. And because we are not able to give them information on the effect of misusing these drugs, they will go out there and misusing and keep misusing drugs. So if they join youth advisory board or council and provide input to policy making on issue on related to young people, you'll find out that they will reduce misuse of drug. For those people who are in Kenya, there's a drug called Tap. I don't know how the company that makes it, but I hear that it's for people who have mental health issue. Now, young people are taking it and are misusing it. And there's this one also known as the amitriptyline, I think. They are also taking it and misusing it. And the diazepam. Now, when we let youth be idle by not engaging them on an advisory board or council, you'll find them misusing this drug because these are learned people. They know this drug, if I take it, this drug, it can be either be useful or it can be a drug on my body. Taking next to the next slide. Policy adoption and decision making. By lobbying elected officials, meeting with the representative and advocating for special policies. Testifying in public hearing, sharing personal experience and expertise. This is whereby, for example, if you have a forum, you have an ambassador who maybe had been misusing drug or any person who understand what effect happened. Through this, he can be able to motivate others and let them learn that misuse of drugs, misuse of medicine is not worth. Engaging in online advocacy using social media to mobilize support for special policy. Why are we talking about social media in, out when it comes to youth? Youth love social media so much. We love social media so much, be it LinkedIn, be it Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp. We love social media. If you can engage in online advocacy by creating a group whereby we have an expertise, for example, I have seen CDC Africa. React Kenya, we have a WhatsApp or a Facebook platform whereby every day, or we have a specific day whereby we engage youth and giving them education, making them aware on the effect of using drug on AMR. For example, right now, if we have a forum on Twitter and say today we'll be joining something on AMR, you'll see that youth will be very active there rather than telling them to come on an open meeting. So most youth are found on social media. That's why we will really praise if we have a forum where we'll be engaging youth on social media. If you can see down here, we have a chat where we have environment. We have the transferability, process design, the adaptability. Then all of them, where are they going? They are going to policy, non-adaption. Environment affect all these things. If we misuse drug on the environment, all this, you know. For example, if you misuse that drug the way I had said before. For example, the way I had said before, if we have a system whereby we will be disposing our drug, we will need to be able to pollute our environment, because I had said that most of that water is what we use to irrigate our plants. That water is what some of us give to the animal to drink, and the same animals on the same vegetable and the same food, we are the consumers. If we are the consumer, what happened? The by accumulation that we had on the antibiotic in the environment will indirect affect us. So we always say we should take care of the environment, because if you take care of the environment, indirectly it will come back to us and it will affect us. I will be taking next to the next slide. Policy information, monitoring policy implementation, tracking how policies are being put in practice, and identify challenges. Most policy are there. Most sector has policy, but the issue is they are not implemented. We know very well, like for somebody to be maybe a pharmacist should be having a certificate. For you to be a nurse, you should have gone through an education process. For you to do this, you should have this. So if you don't have policy implementation, this is where we get challenges. So if we have policy, we should monitor and track down how policies are being put on practice and identifying challenges. Because if you don't, they will be misused. They will be misused thoroughly. Voluntary for organization involved in implementation, gaining first-hand experiences and contributing to positive change. Please give youth chances to volunteer in your organization so that they can learn. If you don't give them chance, they won't get first-hand information. So give them chance, let them volunteer, mentor them, let them learn from you, show them the effect on AMR, show them on how to do things right, be it in agriculture, because I'm mentioning agriculture and I'm mentioning other bodies because agriculture is affecting us also directly. So be it in agriculture, show them the right way, because if you don't, they will misuse the drugs, and the same drug that they will misuse, we will consume. Some of them spread the pesticide, and within they have the product on market, and already the traces of the chemicals are still in the plant, and you yourself you will consume. Because why? You didn't give them a chance to volunteer. If you are a professional, volunteer and learn so that they can come out doing things that are right. And providing feedback to policymakers, sharing observation and suggesting improvement to the implementation process. This is whereby we get gaps. When we go to have policy implementation and we go to whereby we follow up on the tracking how policy are working. You'll go there and find out that there's a gap. For example, most likely I'm on the HIV and STI sector. You find a patient who was on drug. Within 2 days, because he's feeling well, tomorrow he's not taking the medicine. He's saying because he's healed. Coming again, finding out that he's relapsed. He has relapsed. So it's good when we're going out there sharing information and we share the observation. For example, information like this. If you go out there, you get another information. Share it out so that we can know how we can help such people. I'll be taking next. Policy documents. What is a policy document? It's a formal blueprint that defines the goals of an organization at a high level. It outlines the scope and purpose of the document, includes technical and physical evidence, and determines the number and focus of policies required. Example of policy document have the global action plans. We have national action plan and regulation antibiotic. For example, that in UK 20 years vision for antimicrobial resistance. We have the global surveillance network, the glass track. We have the international agreement and declaration of UNGA, for example, that happened recently in 2024. We have the investment in research and development policy document. These are the policy documents that you can go through and learn more, because there are information there that when going through, for example, we have the UNGA declaration of 20, other declaration before the UNGA 2024. We have global surveillance and we have the national. Going through this policy document, you'll be able to get informations that will help out. And this information, how can they help out? We can be sharing such information by youths. We can share such information with them through soft copies, through platform when they are in lectures. So if you go there, if you are a lecturer, for example, if you interact with them, share with them, they can learn and they can read. Through this, they can bring a good impact and they can get a gap. Through this gap, we can be able to know the researcher gap. This is where we have a gap. How can we implement this? By this, we can be able to even have a more strong policy document, maybe in future, that will come out. I will be taking next to the next slide. We have the policy advocacy. Policy advocacy is the strategic effort to influence public policy decision through research evidence, based on communication and to promote that address critical issue. Modern strategies for youth in Africa to AMR is, for example, number one, we have the digital advocacy social media. I talk much on social media. Already you understand why social media so much when it comes to issue on youth. We have the mobile technology and data collection, whereby we can have a tool whereby they use to collect. For example, we can have the home care, we can have other, you know them, whereby we have those apps on their phone, whereby they go and get data. We have this creative content. This whereby these youth, they have talents. We can use those talents that they have. Some are through poems, through storytelling. They can write down or they can even record when advocating for master on AMR, coalition building and networking. This is whereby When they meet, let them network, let them learn from each other, let them share the best practice that they have. For example, I have something that I know that maybe another youth somewhere I don't know. Maybe the other youth have something that maybe I don't know. Let us share the best when we interact by each other. Through this, we can have advocacy policy. Again, traditional media. What are traditional media? These are things like newspaper. We can have the magazine. We can have radios. You know, the old people love radio. So if we have the traditional media where we had the TV, we can be able at least have an ad on TV whereby after every 20 minutes talk about AMR. After every 20 minutes talk about AMR. In radio, after every few minutes we have an ad talk about the AMR. This information will be cascaded down slowly and slowly, but within few days we'll have the full information on the benefit of the AMR. I will be going to my next slide. Now, this is my last slide, and this I'm sharing with you so that for those people who might maybe would want to go through and read more, you can have these references. For example, the Advocacy Institute, right? If you need to know more about the policies, you can do them, learn more about the policies, and understand. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Mr. Elvis, for your presentation. Now we are going to move on to questions. I'm going to read some questions in the chat box so that you could answer. Please, can you get me? All right, thank you. So let me quickly check in the chat box. All right, so there is currently no question. So if you have any questions for the speaker, you can either just type in the chat box or you just indicate by hand show and we give you the floor. All right. So we are going to accord 30 more seconds. If nobody has a question, then I think that we'll be able to close the day. All right, so I have a question in the chat box that says that how can youth get information on the issues of AMR on their fingertips? Mr. Elvis, do you get the question?
Yes, I get the question.
All right, thank you.
Okay, as I said earlier, for us to make sure you get information on fingerprint, we can engage those social media advocacy like Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, because most of them are too much on that. Also, we can help them participate in global forum and bring back ideas to adopt and implement local information. Also, and again, in education initiative like training sessions on AMR for peer and community member to increase access. We can also use youth to conduct surveys. When they conduct surveys, there are those questions that they are always there on the surveys. When they do survey, they will go reading and reading and reading. And through this, they will have the information on their fingerprint. Again, on facilities, we can have the AMR ambassadors, whereby they will be giving information. The third one, we can have peer advocacy. This is where we use peer influence to encourage. We can have peer influence to encourage rational use of antibiotics among youth. We can AMR ambassador who appoint youth as AMR champion in hospital to advocate for the best practice and report misuse and suggest policy improvement whereby we see that there's a gap.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Elvis, for the response. All right, so
Hi, please, can anyone hear me?
yes, Mimi, we can get you now.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've been speaking for a while. It's probably my network. Okay. So, Anne, maybe you'd like to wrap up and then we close the session.
All right, so we have come to the end of day one. I saw that a lot of us were asking in the chat box about attendance and everything. Like you received in your emails, the Zoom is like, we set up it in a way that the Zoom is tracking the attendance automatically, and you just have to attend. And like we said in your emails, you fill in the pre and post evaluation survey. The pre-evaluation survey was sent to all your emails, those who registered for the forum. So you just have to ensure that you fill it. And at the end of the forum, the post-evaluation survey will be sent, and you just have to fill it. And that's going to be all. And you attend the sessions, and you all have your certificate. So thank you all very much for joining us today. And tomorrow is another day. We are definitely looking to have all of you back here tomorrow, so that let's keep on the momentum. So before we close, let's take a souvenir. So kindly turn on your cameras and let's take a quick picture. Manuela, can you take the picture, please?
All right.
Thank you very much.
Guys, please turn on your cameras. Please turn on your cameras very briefly. We know this is an IPSF thing, so wherever you are, please do your best to turn on your cameras. Give us your biggest smile, biggest smile. The lights are out at my place, that's why you can't see my face. But for those who, oh, that's a beautiful smile from baby Musamba. All right. Okay, shout out to Kweku Asari Isiama. Beautiful smile right there. Okay, guys, big smile. We're taking the pictures. Okay. Michael, in Nkrumah Appel, you're not smiling. You're not smiling. Please smile for us. Okay. Guys, hold on just a few more seconds. Just a few more. Beautiful smile from Alan Chore. Shout out to you, Alan. Okay, we're moving on. Thank you, Michael. Beautiful smile right there. Dr. Ofosuhene, beautiful smile. I see you, Katrina. Okay. Guys, hold on just a few more seconds. Thank you, Joe Brony. Thank you so much for that beautiful smile. Somebody showing us eggs and not a smile. Guys, please, we want to see your face. We don't want to see food or props. We beg you. All right. Okay, thank you, Pascal. Pascal, please show us your face, not the eggs. Your face, please. All right. Just 3 more seconds. 3 more seconds. Okay. And we're done. Thank you. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate you for being here. We do not take your efforts for granted. We just want to tell everybody that tomorrow we have the session again at exactly 2 p.m. GMT +0. Please let's come in on time. We cannot attest to the fact that we've had phenomenal speakers today. So if you are looking forward to having more of this, please tomorrow don't be late. Come in on time so we can start early and finish early. Like our regional project officer said, there is a post form that you're going to fill on Wednesday, and there's a pre-form that you have to fill. It's in your DMs, it's in your email. So if you go back to your email, what you used to register, you see the pre-form. Please know that this is what you use to qualify yourself for a certificate. Don't worry about attendance. We picked each and every one that joined in, but please do well to fill the pre-form. Check your name spellings correctly so that we can meet everybody at that point of need. Once again, thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate you. We are going to have more Power Pack sessions tomorrow, more icebreakers. Come prepared, and we know you have a great time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, bye, bye.
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 Bye,
Bye.
guys. Bye.
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 Big shout out to Miss Hope Lona. Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Sandro. We appreciate you guys so much. Thank you, Anne.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.